Chapter 564. Once a master, always a mother. That night, Wang Teng and Dan Taixian stayed in the capital Xia military district. Wang Teng was a major general now, so by right, he belonged to the military. It was reasonable for him to live in the military district. There were accommodations especially for outsiders in the military district. The treatment was not bad. Under the guidance of a soldier, they passed through a small cobblestone path and saw many simple buildings in front of them. They looked exquisite. It was hard to imagine that such accommodations existed in the military that was known for being frugal. Noticing Wang Ting's surprise, Dan Taixian explained, "This area is normally used to welcome foreign guests. Hence, it mustn't look too shabby." Wang Teng was enlightened and nodded. He discovered that Dan Taixian seemed familiar with this place. It wasn't her first time here. Loft 03, 05, and 08 are empty. "Major General Wang, you can choose one," the soldier leading the way said. "I'll take 08. I came to capital Xia to earn a fortune, so I'll choose this lucky number." Rubbing his chin, Wang Ting said seriously. The soldier, Dan Taixian, rolled her eyes. She was speechless. "All right, you can get going. You don't have to worry about us," Dan Taixian said to the soldier. "Yes." After the soldier left, Wang Ting asked Dan Taixian curiously, "Master, where will you be staying?" Dan Taixian frowned. "Stop calling me master. You're no weaker than me now. In the martial arts world, your ability decides your status. You can talk to me as a peer." Wang Teng didn't expect her to talk about this. He was shocked. Then, he straightened his face and said, "Once a master, always a mother." Dan Taixian was speechless. To hell with always a mother. What could you expect from a hog but a grunt? Cough, "Sorry, I made a mistake. That isn't the main point. The thing is, I always treated you as my master." Wang Ting coughed awkwardly and continued, "You taught me many things in the past. When we went to the Crimson Tiger Troop, you stood up for me without any hesitation. I'll always remember it." Dan Taixian glanced at Wang Ting. This fellow had some conscience. Her expression remained emotionless as she stretched her back and said lazily, "All right, let's not talk about the past. If you really remember what I've done for you, call me sister from now on." "All right, I'll call you Sister Shen from now." Wang Ting knew that as his status changed, it would be awkward to keep calling Dan Taixian his master. Hence, he agreed to her request. Dan Taixian nodded. He pointed to the loft beside her and said, "That's where I'll be staying. Call me if you need anything." Wang Ting finally saw the Xian doorplate on the loft. She had a personal loft here. "Why don't I have this treatment?" He wasn't convinced. He was a major general who was going to represent the country soon. Why couldn't he enjoy a similar treatment? Outrageous. He must talk to the three great commanders about this the next time he saw them. "Wait until you're a lieutenant general." Dan Taixian snorted and walked towards the loft. She left Wang Ting with a heartless back view. Wang Ting was stunned for a moment before regaining his senses. She had mocked him. Dan Taixian was still the evil Dan Taixian. "Since you're not my master anymore, I won't give in to you." Wang Teng glared at Dan Taixian's amazing figure as he muttered to himself. Dan Taixian felt the furious gaze and froze. She turned around abruptly and glared ruthlessly at Wang Teng. She was welcomed with an innocent and pure gaze. "If you look at me with that gaze again, I'll dig your eyes out." Dan Taixian threatened him before slamming the door shut and disappearing from Wang Teng's sight. HMPH, a paper tiger. Wang Teng laughed and shook his head as if he had discovered something funny. In the number 08 loft, Wang Teng sat down cross-legged on the bed and focused on his attributes panel. Constellation Force, Fire 22. His mind was fixed on the Constellation Force. He felt it thoroughly and discovered that there were strands of special Fire Force mixed in his normal Fire Force. Visit Ria Del. Me for extra chapters. The next instant, Wang Teng opened his eyes and lifted his hand. Fire Force surged out from his body and congregated into a ball of flame on his palm. At this moment, there was an even more scorching flame within this fiery red flame. Wang Teng removed it from the normal flame carefully. In the end, it formed a dark red flame. Its color was darker, and its temperature was higher, possessing a stronger destructive power. Based on what the leader said, this constellation force is mutated from our normal force. Wang Teng stared at the dark red flame in deep thought. In that case, there must be something connecting these two forces. This connection might be a profound force skill scripture. The humans on Earth lack this advanced skill scripture, so they can only stop at the general stage. Wang Teng frowned. He had a sudden thought. The ancient god's body also had a stronger and more profound force skill scripture. However, it cultivates the body and not force. Wait, that isn't right. I remember that when I raised my ancient god's body's level, a certain force merged into my body. It was similar to the constellation force. But that force was purer, and it didn't possess any attributes. Wang Teng recalled the feeling as he activated his ancient god's body. He tried to sense the secret within. Boom! His heart pounded forcefully. The blood in his body churned and nourished his flesh and bones. A powerful strength surged out of his body. A magical golden mark appeared on his forehead. Wang Ting followed the path on the ancient god's body. A loud explosion suddenly came from his body, and a large suction force surged out. It was nighttime. The stars hung high in the sky. Suddenly, all the stars shimmered and blinked once. Then, the force within the area flowed toward him frantically. These forces weren't limited to one type. There were all kinds of attributes: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, and ice. All of them flowed over and turned into a purer form of energy using the ancient god's body. Finally, it merged into his body. As expected, Wang Teng activated the scripture once and felt the tremendous changes outside. He immediately stopped the cultivation of the ancient god's body. Bewilderment appeared in his eyes. The ancient god's body was exceptionally domineering. It was able to absorb all forces into his body. No wonder the ancient god's tribe sucked the energy from the planets and stars to raise their cultivation. Their path was too powerful. If I'm right, those forces are the constellation forces. Wang Ting took a deep breath to calm down. He made his guess. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Please report us if you find any errors so we can fix it ASAP. Chapter 565 Wang Wikipediting. When Wang Ting was cultivating the ancient god's body, the three great commanders walked out of their lodgings and looked up at the sky. Did you sense that? The lofty Commander Long asked in a stern voice. The fluctuation was violent, but it disappeared too quickly. I can't find the location. Commander Hong was scrawny, but his voice was loud and clear. The last refined-looking elder was Commander Yong. His gaze flickered as he said, I wonder who can cause such a huge commotion. Do you think it's old Wu? Before Commander Long could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. Old Long, be careful of what you say, Commander Hong and Commander Yong said simultaneously. I know. Commander Long was frustrated. He muttered, if they found any results during their research, they can be direct. What's the point of hiding? Commander Hong and Commander Yong ignored him. The three of them investigated the commotion again but discovered nothing. They went back to their lodgings dejectedly. Wang Teng didn't know that the commotion caused by his ancient god's body cultivation had attracted the attention of the three great commanders. Honestly, what happened just now was out of his expectations. In the past, he used his blank attributes to raise the level of his ancient god's body, so he didn't need any external force. Hence, no one detected anything. But now, he cultivated the ancient god's body properly using the standard cultivation method, so a large amount of force was needed. This would definitely attract others' attention, and they would realize that his cultivation method was different. Wang Teng didn't mind releasing this cultivation method to the public when the right time came. But it wasn't now. He hadn't experienced it yet, so why should he let others do it first? He had his selfish thoughts too. The ancient god's body was exceptionally powerful. He wouldn't tell everyone about it. He would tell them after he found a normal force skill scripture to cultivate constellation force. That way, His heart wouldn't hurt. It looks like the leader's guess is right. Wang Teng wondered to himself. The constellation arose from normal force. The next stage of human cultivation was to learn how to evolve force into constellation force so that they could move to a higher realm. Wang Teng pondered to himself silently. All sorts of ideas went through his mind. He had already experienced the process of the transformation of forces, so he had some understanding of it. If he could merge this skill into the sky-rank scriptures he possessed, would he be able to come up with a new way of cultivating constellation force? Wang Ting's eyes lit up at the thought. He immediately put his idea into motion. He possessed many advanced rank scriptures from yellow rank to sky rank. No one had more scriptures than him. In the future, he could be called Wang Wikipediting. A smile appeared at the edge of his lips. He closed his eyes and focused on going through the constellation force skill scripture in his mind. The night passed quickly. The next morning, Dan Taishen called Wang Teng up for breakfast. Wang Teng opened the door with panda eyes. He had underestimated the difficulty of creating a scripture. This wasn't something a normal human could do. He felt that his head was going to explode after thinking the entire night. However, his efforts weren't useless. He did have some new enlightenment, but he was still a vast distance away from creating a new constellation force skill scripture. "What's the matter with you?" Dan Taishen asked in surprise. "Nothing. I didn't sleep well," Wang Teng replied casually. "Didn't sleep well?" Dan Taishen looked at him curiously. Then, she thought of something, and her expression turned strange. "Young man, you need to curb yourself." "Fart." Wang Teng almost vomited blood. "Curb your head. What are you thinking? Am I wrong?" Dan Taishen glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. "Definitely. I'm so handsome. Why will I do that?" Wang Teng was speechless. "What are you referring to? I don't understand. I just hope that you will stop staying up late." Wang Teng, Dan Taishen smirked in her heart when she saw his frustrated expression. "How dare you be cheeky around me?" She was taking revenge for what happened yesterday night. After their breakfast, they prepared to go back to their lodging. "What do you plan to do for the next few days?" Dan Taishen asked. "Nothing. I'm going back to cultivate." Wang Teng hadn't given up. He decided to go back and try it out again. Visit Ria Me for extra chapters. "Since we're here, let me bring you to a good place," Dan Taishen said with a mysterious smile. "Oh, what place?" Wang Teng got interested when he saw her expression. "You'll know once you get there," Dan Taishen said, "but that place needs some contribution points." Contribution points. Wang Teng knew what contribution points were. The military would reward people with contribution points after they completed a mission or made great achievements. These contribution points could be used in the military or exchanged for other resources in official stores. Honestly, he had quite some contribution points on his hands. Without him knowing, he had made many contributions to the human race. He caught the spy for dark apparitions, helped in the Star Maple City War and the Sea Beasts riot. He made great contributions during these events, so the higher authorities gave him his due contribution points. However, Wang Teng didn't need any other resources, so he never used them. They walked deep into the military district and stopped outside a heavily guarded building. "Please show your identity." The guard walked up and stopped them. Wang Teng and Dan Taishen took out their identity certificates. The three guards present saluted and said indifferently, "Lieutenant General Dan, Major General Wang, please enter." The two of them entered the building and took the elevator to the underground level. The underground space was extremely similar to the space Wang Teng visited yesterday. A silver-white corridor appeared in front of him. They walked forward. On the way, Dan Taishen explained, "The place I'm bringing you to is called virtual reality." Virtual reality. Wang Teng remembered something. "Isn't it the same as the virtual combat chambers we have in school?" "If it were the same, why would I bring you here?" Dan Taishen smiled and asked. "Huh?" Wang Teng looked at her curiously. "The virtual combat chamber here is more advanced than the virtual combat chambers at the academy. You will know the details later," Dan Taishen said secretively. The two of them came to an underground room. There were enclosed cabins that looked like coffins placed all around the room. Many people were lying inside. Swipe some contribution points and enter, Dan Taishen said. She swiped her contribution points and laid in one cabin. Wang Ting looked around him and shook his head. Why did she have to be so secretive about this? He followed Dan Taixuan's actions and swiped his contribution points. A lovely sound suddenly rang inside the cabin. Respected Major General Wang, welcome to the virtual reality system. You need 1,000 contribution points to enter for 10 hours. Do you wish to enter? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Please report us if you find any errors so we can fix it ASAP. Chapter 566. Does this human likes to get tortured? 1,000 contribution points. Wang Teng was stunned. 1,000 contribution points for 10 hours was a lot. He looked at his personal wristwatch. Given his current status, the wristwatch was no longer the one from Jisin Marshall House but the one given by the military. It had better functions and was one of the top rune equipment on Earth. There was a record of Wang Ting's contribution points in it, and there were 56,000 points. Wang Teng was astonished again when he saw his contribution points. It was quite a substantial number. If he didn't make so many contributions, he wouldn't have been able to obtain so many points. That was fine. Now, he had enough contribution points for him to squander for a while. He made his choice immediately. Yes. The cabin door in front of him opened slowly. Please enter the virtual chamber, wear the sensor helmet, and connect to the virtual reality. The ethereal voice sounded again. Wang Ting scanned the interior of the virtual cabin. He smiled, entering the cabin according to the instructions while wearing the helmet. Connecting to the virtual reality. Please concentrate your spirit. Wang Teng closed his eyes and concentrated his spirit. Suddenly, there was a glimpse of light in his sea of consciousness, and his spirit was instantly sucked into it. The next moment, Wang Ting felt his eyes getting blinded by the bright, dazzling light. However, his spiritual perception was still intact. Imperial realm spirit was not something ordinary people could match up to. The spiritual power gradually extended, surprising Wang Ting. He realized that the surroundings seemed real. Every area that the spiritual power passed through felt real. It was completely different from what he had experienced in the virtual combat chamber. He opened his eyes and looked around. There was a seemingly quiet street, lined with high-rise steel buildings on its sides, whose metal surfaces reflected dazzling light. How is it? Dan Taixuan's voice could be heard from the side. This is virtual reality, Wang Ting cried out in astonishment. If he hadn't known in advance where this place was, he would have almost thought that he was in the real world. Not bad. Do you feel that the 1,000 contribution points were well spent? Dan Taishen smiled. Just based on this sense of reality, it wasn't a waste. Wang Teng was speechless and nodded. With a slight frown, he asked curiously, is this virtual reality a product of our research? You think too much. With our current technology, we would need at least hundreds of years to create something like this, Dan Taishen answered. Then where did this come from? A thought flashed through Wang Teng's mind, and he probed. Is this alien technology? Oh, you guessed it. Dan Taishen glanced at him in surprise. She walked towards him while nodding. Go out first. Well, talk while walking. When the aliens landed on Earth, the spacecraft they were riding in was mostly destroyed. However, some of the technologies and equipment survived the crash, and this virtual reality cabin was one of them. Spacecraft. Wang Ting was attracted by the content of Dan Taixuan's words, and his eyes were shining brightly as he asked curiously, what kind? After we get out, I'll bring you to see it. With our authority, we can enter that place. Wang Ting nodded and didn't ask any more. Filled with emotions, he said, looks like the aliens' technology is much more advanced than ours. That's right. Which is why all the countries are worried, or even terrified. Dan Taishen frowned. The universe is too vast, and Earth is just a drop of water in the ocean. It might be just a planet in the corner that has life, but no one knows what it is like outside of the solar system. Now that aliens with scales all over their bodies have appeared, it is very likely that other life forms also exist. They are stronger than us, and their technology is more advanced than ours. Earth is as fragile as a newborn child. Everyone is worried. If the aliens target the Earth one day and descend onto Earth, what will happen? Wang Teng's expression became serious. It was obvious. If that day arrived, there would be drastic changes to Earth. If the nest fell, the eggs would be broken. Earth was home to all human beings, and aliens were outsiders. Those who were not their kin were sure to be of a different heart. This sentence was not unfounded. The weak would eventually be stepped on, and no one would treat someone well for no good reason. Now, Earth was too weak. Judging from the current situation, these aliens have not discovered Earth's existence, Wang Ting said. The universe is too big, and it's normal not to find us for the time being. Dan Taixian nodded. Maybe the aliens that we captured were just too unlucky and strayed onto Earth and that everything was just an accident. Is it possible for them to have sent a signal before they crashed? Wang Teng wasn't as optimistic and thought of a possibility in his mind. We can't rule it out, but we can't do anything about it, can we? Dan Taixian said helplessly. All we can do now is to improve ourselves, to deal with the powerful enemy who may come at any time. This world is getting more and more interesting. Wang Ting took a deep breath and smiled. You're still able to laugh. Dan Taixian rolled her eyes. Even with her calm and composed disposition, she felt burdened. However, Wang Ting could still laugh about it. Even she felt that his brain was wired differently from ordinary people. Did he have a screw loose? Or an extra screw in his head? Wang Ting suddenly realized that Dan Taixian's gaze was a little strange. Are you thinking about something bad again? No. Dan Taixian immediately denied and reacted. Why the word again? What do you think of me? You will have to ask yourself that. Wang Ting shrugged. As they talked, they turned at the crossroads and came to another street where some figures appeared. There were all kinds of stores. Some people had opened stores in virtual reality. Are you surprised? Dan Taixian laughed. What's the point of opening a store in the virtual world? Wang Ting couldn't help but ask. Only items that are produced in the virtual reality can be used here. If you don't believe me, take a look at your wristwatch, Dan Taixian explained. Wang Ting lowered his head and fiddled with it. As expected, the wristwatch became a display item that could not be used at all. Only its time was still ticking. Now you know why. Dan Taixian smiled. This virtual reality is very wide. Although there are no other races here, there are countless star beasts. Training here would greatly improve you. Fighting here would require weapons, and the materials come from virtual reality. It's a bit complicated to describe. Anyway, a self-contained trading system is formed here. Wang Ting had a thought in his mind. Wait, why are there only star beasts and not other races? Also, are the buildings here created by us, or were they originally here, to begin with? Looks like you discovered where the problem lies. Dan Taixian was surprised by Wang Ting's subtlety. Some people suspect that we are missing a piece of technology. Missing a piece of technology? Wang Ting seemed to have grasped it, but he couldn't figure it out. It felt extremely uncomfortable, as though something was scratching his heart. Have you watched science fantasy movies? Do you know what's Skynet? Dan Taixian asked. Are you saying? A sharp glint appeared in his eyes. He looked at Dan Taixian in astonishment. We only have these virtual reality cabins. Some people guessed that this is just an empty shell, so the virtual reality we are entering is the most basic one. If we can connect to the alien Skynet, something unexpected might appear, Dan Taixian said slowly. Skynet. Wang Ting muttered to himself. Skynet is just the name we give it. We don't know what it is, Dan Taixian continued. But we know that it's more advanced than our internet. It's hard to believe. Wang Ting gave a bitter smile. What's so hard about it? The writers of science fantasy movies have done the thinking for us. No one had seen it in the past, so we find it too far-fetched. But now, do you still think it doesn't exist? Dan Taishen asked. Maybe. Wang Teng didn't give a definite answer. Let's go outside the city and kill some star beasts to get a feel of it. Dan Taishen was about to rise into the air when she stopped suddenly. Do you want to buy some weapons? I have enough virtual coins to buy a weapon. It's all right. I can kill star beasts without weapons. Wang Ting shook his head. Dan Taishen remained quiet. She flew into the air and rushed out of the city. Wang Ting tapped the ground and turned into a ray of light. He disappeared on the spot. The two of them flew out of the city. No one stopped them at the city gates. This city was empty. Only a few humans were living inside because virtual reality hadn't been popularized. The numbers weren't enough to start the operations of the city. Dan Taishen and Wang Ting entered a mountain and started hunting. At their level, they wouldn't feel anything if their prey's level was too low. It wouldn't give them any experience. They searched for some time before they discovered a huge ice python sleeping beside an ice lake. You wanted to kill ice element star beasts, right? There's one ice element python right here for you to practice, Dan Taishen whispered. She was hiding on a large tree with Wang Ting and looking at the ice python lying on the ice lake. Wang Ting wondered if Dan Taishen purposely found this ice element star beast for him because she knew that he wanted to hunt for ice element star beasts. He glanced at Dan Taishen secretly and noticed that her expression didn't change. She seemed to have discovered this ice python coincidentally instead of searching for it specifically. Visit Ria Del. Me for extra chapters. Page. I'm thinking too much. Wang Ting mocked himself. His gaze turned sharp as he looked at the large python. Its huge body circled the lake, protecting the lake in its arms. Ice blue scales covered its body, and it was giving off a chilling aura. There were two sharp horns on its head, with a ball of faint ice mist floating above them. Immortal. This was Wang Ting's first thought. Then, he sensed that this python was different from the other pythons on Earth. They weren't the same breed. The animals on Earth might have mutated, but they still possessed their original traits. However, the traits this star beast had were a little different in essence. It was just like two different human races. The next moment, he moved. His body vanished, appearing above the giant blue python's forehead. He clenched his fists and smashed it down like a cannon. Boom! An explosion resounded. The frightening fist pressure squeezed the air around it, and a huge outline of an ape king materialized. This was a serious punch. From his spiritual sight, this ice python was a low-tier lord-level star beast. Hence, Wang Ting didn't hold back his strength. The giant python woke up with a start. It raised its head and hissed into the sky. When it saw Wang Ting's attack landing on its body, a humane emotion flashed past its cold and vertical pupils. Then, it smashed into Wang Ting without evading. A thick layer of ice congregated on its horns, forming an arc and looking extremely sturdy. This was a real iron head. All of this happened within a few breaths. Wang Ting's fist landed on the ice-blue giant python's head. Boom! Both sides paused for a split second. The giant python gave a look of contempt. It seemed to be mocking the human for overestimating himself. This is it. Crack. Right then, lines started to appear on the layer of ice on the giant python's head. The cracks spread outwards. The giant python was astounded. Bang! Suddenly, the ice layer shattered entirely, and Wang Teng's fist smashed down with overwhelming force. The giant python's body was thrown out. It smashed onto the ground and rolled a few times violently. The python was stunned by the fist. Some distance away, Dan Taixuan's jaw almost dropped. Why was this fellow so strong? He slammed a lord-level star beast on the ground with a single punch. Wang Teng was stunned too as he looked at the attribute bubbles that had suddenly appeared on the ground. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Seriously? There were attribute bubbles in the virtual world? He was honestly shocked. What kind of world is this? This doesn't make sense. He picked up the attribute bubbles anxiously. Ice Force *130 Ice Force *99 blank attribute *58. He confirmed the changes in his attributes panel before he believed that he could pick up attributes bubbles in the virtual world. Virtual reality wouldn't be more advanced than the system. They wouldn't be able to clone another system out, right? That was impossible. Wang Ting was extremely confident in his system. That meant that there were some special circumstances in this virtual world. No matter what, this was a good thing. He was looking for a way to raise his ice force, and here it came. Even heaven was helping him. Wang Ting's eyes lit up. He looked at the giant python as if it was an ice baby. The ice-blue giant python shook its head. Its puzzling gaze turned cold again, and it stared at the human in front with killing intent. That's right, this is the gaze. Come and kill me. Go all out and kill me. Come. Wang Ting shouted excitedly. The ice-blue giant python, does this human likes to get tortured? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Please report us if you find any errors so we can fix it ASAP. Chapter 567: A very serious punch. Dan Taixian was still thinking if she should help Wang Ting. However, when she saw him suddenly getting excited, she felt that her worry was for nothing. Indeed, Wang Ting was able to punch this low-tier Lord-level python into the air with a single punch. Without any ultimate moves, he might still be able to defeat this star beast. As a 10-star was Brigadier General, he jumped a level and was fighting with an 11-star Lord-level star beast. He had gone further and further on the invincible path. No, as his ex-master, how could she fall behind him? Dan Taixian gritted her teeth. The motivation to become stronger instantly rose in her heart. She was a top-tier talent too. If not, she wouldn't be able to become a general stage martial warrior at 27. Hence, it was understandable why she felt frustrated when Wang Ting caught up with her. Dan Taixian glanced at Wang Ting, who was fighting with the ice python. The corners of her lips twitched. What was he excited about? The ice-blue giant python moved its body slowly as it stared vigilantly at Wang Ting. It felt a sense of danger from this human. Especially that gaze. He seemed like a maniac. Hiss. It hissed at Wang Ting before it shrunk its head back. Wang Ting didn't move. Although the ice python had shrunk its head back, it still didn't launch an attack. What's this stupid python doing? Wang Ting was stunned, feeling confused. Was that a fake move just now? As a Lord-level star beast, why are you making a fake move? Do you think we're playing basketball? Fake move? This ice python seems like an idiot. Did I hurt its head just now? Wang Ting started to look at the python with compassion. It was quite pitiful. It wasn't easy to become a Lord-level star beast, but he had knocked it stupid. Never mind, this star beast is stupid, so there's no point in keeping it. I will kill it and eat it. I wonder if ice element star beast's meat is delicious. Wang Ting had never tasted it before. As these random thoughts flashed through his mind, Wang Ting suddenly disappeared on the spot. He turned into a ray of light and shot towards the ice python. He raised his fist, and metal force gushed out, forming a powerful and firm force on his fist. Skyrank Battle Technique Golden Star Fist. Strength of Ultima. This was a very serious punch. In that instant, the ice python felt an extremely frightening power from Wang Ting's fist. The fist zoomed in continuously in its eyes like a huge mountain boring down on it. This is... Dan Taixian sensed something and widened her eyes in astonishment. The ice python hissed fiercely. An ice-blue ball of light quickly formed in its mouth, and it spurted it out. Boom! The ice-blue ball of light went straight for Wang Ting's fist. Force glow exploded, and the terrifying residual force of their attacks swept through the lake. The center of this ball of light erupted. Dan Taixian squinted as she stared at the point of contact. Roar! The ice python's howl was heard from afar. The pain in its voice was obvious. Dan Taixian's expression changed. The ice python seemed to have suffered miserably during their exchange just now. The dust blown into the sky by the strong wind dissipated gradually. The situation in front was finally revealed. A deep hole had appeared on the ground. The ground and buried deep inside. Its hard scales had cracked, and many parts of it were broken. The scales were scattered everywhere. A large pool of blood flowed down its head. It looked tragic. There was a figure standing above its head. It was, of course, Wang Ting. Is it dead? Dan Taishen frowned. This result was out of her expectations. There was a difference in their level, so it was hard to believe that the ice python got so easily defeated by Wang Ting. Did this ice python look fierce but was actually useless? At this moment, the ice python suddenly opened its eyes and hissed. It moved its body frantically. Wang Ting stood on its head firmly without falling. He grabbed one of the ice python's horns, and his gaze turned cold. You're putting up a stiff resistance. The ice python flung its head furiously, wanting to fling Wang Ting off. At the same time, a chill surged out of its horn and spread to Wang Ting's arm. A thick layer of ice froze around Wang Ting's arm. Are you trying to freeze me? Wang Ting smirked. He released his emerald-glazed flame, covering his arm internally and externally. The fire was the bane of ice. Moreover, the emerald-glazed flame was a divine fire, so there weren't many ice forces that could resist it. The ice python's ice force hadn't reached that stage. The thick layer of ice melted instantly. Wang Ting didn't retract his emerald-glazed flame. He allowed it to spread out until it reached the ice python. Roar! The ice python's eyes widened in surprise, and it hissed in agony. Hot. Visit Riadel. Me for extra chapters. Extremely hot. What did this human do? The ice element star beast wasn't able to withstand the scorching heat of the emerald-glazed flame at all. This heat was the worst torture for it. Wang Ting's gaze was cold. He grabbed the other horn with his free hand, and the emerald-glazed flame seeped out of it, enveloping the hand. The two ice-blue horns of the python started turning red at a visible speed. They seemed to be getting cooked. The ice python gave a loud hiss. Its voice had changed. It seemed to be suffering great pain. Dan Taishen looked at the scene from afar and suddenly started pitying the ice python. It was tragic. This giant python was extremely unlucky to have met Wang Ting, a person who possessed the divine fire. It could only be tormented. The green flame wrapped around the ice python's horns. The scorching heat flowed into its body through the sharp horns, and the ice mist was evaporated. Steam appeared above its head. No matter how hard the ice python struggled, it couldn't break free from Wang Ting. At this moment, it understood what despair felt like. Boom! The next moment, the ice python stopped struggling. Its huge body slammed on the ground forcefully, and it stopped moving. Smoke rose from its head. It seemed to be cooked. Wang Ting leaped down from the ice python's head calmly. He glanced at the attribute bubbles around him and swept them over with his spiritual power. He picked them up. Ice Force * 230 Ice Force * 560 Ice Force * 360 Ice Force * 420 Advanced Stage Ice Talent * 156 Blank Attribute * 640 Wang Ting counted his gains silently and was overjoyed. There were 1,570 points of Ice Force. Adding the 229 points from before, he had gained 1,799 points in total. This was not bad. Ice Force 25,075,000, 7-star. Wang Ting looked at his Ice Force. The gains allowed his Ice Force to reach the middle zone of the 7-star level. He needed only 2,500 points more to break through this level. What did this mean? Simple. All he needed to do was to kill another Lord-level Ice Element Star Beast. At this moment, Wang Ting was full of motivation. He hoped that he could find another Lord-level Star Beast immediately and pick up another round of Ice Force from it. He wanted his Ice Force to reach 8-star immediately. Besides his Ice Force, Wang Ting also received 156 points of Advanced Stage Ice Talent and 640 blank attributes. The gains were not bad. Virtual reality was a good place. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Please report us if you find any errors so we can fix it ASAP. Chapter 568 What a great way to kill all the ants. There must be some secrets in this virtual reality because he could pick up attributes. Wang Ting thought to himself. He was restless. Dan Taishen walked over with a strange expression. You cooked it. Cough, I didn't. It's not entirely cooked. It's probably half done. Wang Ting kicked the ice python's corpse as he coughed awkwardly. Is there a difference? Dan Taishen rolled her eyes at him. Of course. Half-cooked meant that I'm not so cruel, Wang Ting said in a righteous tone. Dan Taishen. She was shocked by this person's shamelessness. Don't care about the details. I learned many things from the fight just now. I plan to look for other ice element star beasts, Wang Ting said. VO all right. You seem like a fish in water, so I don't have to follow you anymore. We'll move separately and gather in the city when the time is up. Wang Ting had no objection. He had already found a special cultivation method for himself in virtual reality. Now, he just wanted to look for ice element star beasts quickly and hunt them. Other people could only raise their battle ability through the experiences in virtual reality, but he could get attribute points. If others knew about his cheat, they might turn green with envy. Dan Taishen turned and prepared to leave. Suddenly, she stopped and turned back. She asked, was there Ultima in your punch just now? You noticed it. Wang Teng exclaimed in surprise. So it's true. You have grasped the Ultima. Dan Taishen was flabbergasted. She stared at Wang Teng as if he were a monster. I was lucky, Wang Teng replied calmly. Hurry and leave. I don't want to see you. Dan Taishen felt her heart churning in pain. This fellow was here to stimulate others. After separating with Dan Taishen, Wang Teng started roaming the mountains, searching for ice element star beasts seriously. Where are you? Come into my arms quickly, Wang Teng muttered as he combed the area for ice element star beasts. Wherever he went, the star beast around him scurried away as if they saw something terrifying her. Wang Teng saw a high mountain in the distance. The peak of the mountain was white, turning into a natural ice world. His eyes lit up. There must be ice element star beasts up there. The next instant, Wang Ting rose into the air and turned into a ray of light. He flew straight for the peak. He stopped in mid-air, ignoring the wind pressure in the sky. He activated his spiritual sight and scanned the peak below. His eyes were like a radar scanning the force fluctuations below. Suddenly, an icy blue ball of light entered his vision. I finally found it. Wang Teng was elated. He rushed towards the ball of light without any hesitation. From the size of the ball of the light, it didn't look like a Lord-level starbeast, but it was still an ice element starbeast. Ice element martial warriors were rare, so he could only gain ice force from ice element starbeasts. He mustn't let go of any chance. Soon, Wang Ting saw the appearance of the ice element starbeast. This was a snow-white giant ice ant. Its body was like an ice sculpture, crystal clear. There was a snow-white shell that looked like armor made of snow. Its appearance was magical. The ice ant was moving a corpse and crawling forward. Wang Ting wanted to attack it, but when he saw this scene, he stopped abruptly. The habits and living conditions of ants appeared in his mind. Although ice ants were star beasts, they were similar to normal ants. There must be a nest of them. This ice ant was just carrying its prey back to its nest. Wang Teng decided to follow it. After making his decision, Wang Teng hid his aura entirely. He tailed the ice ant. Ants weren't slow, but they were too small as compared to humans. Hence, they needed more time to move the same distance as a human. However, the ice ant in front of him was anything but small. It was the size of a small beetle car. It traveled a few hundred meters in an instant. After some time, a nest hidden under the rocks appeared in front of Wang Ting. The ice ant arrived at the entrance of the nest. Another ice ant crawled out, and they touched each other's antenna. Then, they crawled into the nest. Wang Ting floated down from the sky. This entrance was big enough for him to enter while standing straight. Activating his dark talent, dark force surged out. He executed the shadow-merging secret skill and hid in the dark as he moved into the nest. As he went deeper, he realized that the nest extended in all directions, and the paths had many twists and turns. The nest spanned a huge area. Very soon, he saw an ice ant. Wang Teng didn't attack it immediately. He wanted to understand the situation first. He headed deeper into the nest and met more and more ice ants along the way. The edge of his lips lifted into an arc. There were so many ice ants, so there must be many attribute bubbles. This was going to be a good harvest. Wang Ting suppressed the excitement in his heart. He took a few turns and finally came to a huge underground space. A large queen ant was lying horizontally here. Its entire body was white, and it was bloated and round. If you took a bite of it, juice might spurt out. Wang Ting scanned it with his spiritual sight and noticed that the intensity of the light in the queen ant's body had reached mid-tier lord level. This queen ant was stronger than the ice python he met some time ago. But Wang Ting looked at the bloated body of the queen ant. He wondered if it was still able to fight. Could it be that it was just a reproductive tool like a normal queen ant? It would be great if that was true. One he could kill a lord-level star beast with extreme ease. Of course, Wang Ting knew that this might not be the case. There were all kinds of star beasts. He didn't dare to treat this queen ant as a weakling. Furthermore, he looked around the queen ant. There were a few soldier ants present. Based on the intensity of the forces in the soldier ants' bodies, some of them were at the 9-star while a few had reached low-tier lord level. This ant nest was not bad. Although Wang Ting was elated, he was a little afraid. Ants were known for their numbers. Even he would feel terrified if all the ice ants swarmed out of their nest at once. I need to think of a way to settle it once and for all. Wang Ting touched his chin and pondered to himself as he hid in the dark. This nest of ice ants was a little hard to swallow, but he wouldn't give up. Once he killed all of them, he would be able to gain a huge number of Ice Force attribute bubbles. His Ice Force might leap all the way to the 9-star level because of this. Wang Ting shuddered in excitement when he imagined that scene. His mind worked furiously. That's it. Suddenly, an idea flashed past his mind. With an evil smile at the edge of his lips, he retreated toward the entrance. When he arrived at the entrance, his gaze flickered, and poison force gushed out of his body. Then, the emerald glazed flame came out. Once the poison force touched the emerald glazed flame, a thick black smoke erupted. Wang Ting pushed his force out and formed a strong gale. He blew the black smoke into the nest. What a great way to kill all the ants. Chapter 569. A Fat Queen Ant. When Wang Ting released the poisonous smoke at the entrance, his expression was extremely calm. It would be better off dead than be an emotionless reproductive tool. Wang Ting felt that he was doing a good deed. Ding! He received a good man card. He successfully gave himself a good man card. At this moment, faint crawling sounds could be heard inside the nest. It didn't sound like 1 or 2 ants. Instead, there seemed to be 4 to 5 ice ants crawling inside. A sharp glint flashed past Wang Ting's eyes. He raised his large fist. The instant an ice ant popped its head out, Wang Ting smashed it with his fist. Bang! The ice ant's shell collapsed in a single blow, and its head exploded. Ice Force *88 blank attribute *56. Wang Ting picked up the attribute bubbles. 88 points. This was a lucky start. The second this ice ant died, the one behind crawled out hurriedly. Then, the third and the fourth one came out. Wang Ting was feeling over the moon. He sent an ice ant to hell with every single punch he made. Ice Force *50 blank attribute *38 intermediate stage ice talent *10 Ice Force *70 blank attribute *46 Ice Force *66. Wang Ting picked up the attribute bubbles. His Ice Force rose continuously, and his blank attributes increased steadily too. The ice ants in front weren't strong. They were at most at the 4-star or 5-star level. The intermediate stage ice talent some of them dropped was useless to Wang Ting. As time passed, more and more ice ants crawled out. Wang Ting was overjoyed. These were all moving attributes. He got increasingly excited as he killed the ants. Soon, a small pile of ant corpses was formed at the entrance of the nest. This virtual reality was extremely lifelike. The corpses of the dead star beasts wouldn't disappear instantly. They remained here and merged into the natural environment. Hence, Wang Ting had no choice but to add a movement. Whenever he killed an ant, he would kick the corpse to the side. If not, the entrance would be blocked. Suddenly, Wang Teng's expression changed. He felt a few stronger auras coming closer. The Lord-level soldier ants. Wang Teng knew that the main highlight of the show was here. After so many unimportant ants died, the bosses inside couldn't sit still anymore. Swoosh! A figure suddenly rushed out and charged towards Wang Teng. Wang Teng squinted and slammed his fist out. Mirage Mountain Fist. Boom! The ice ant that charged out stopped abruptly as if it was frozen. Everyone knew that ants were extremely strong. They were able to lift an item 400 times their body weight and drag an item 1,700 times their body weight. If a normal ant was so strong, think about how much strength these ice ants possessed. Wang Teng didn't exert his entire force in this move, but he already felt the powerful strength coming from the body of the ice ant in front of him. They were at a standstill. At the same time, a cold stream flowed over from the ice ant's body. If he wasn't a fire element martial warrior, he would have gotten hurt by the coldness. If his body was frozen, how could he resist the ice ant? Hence, normal martial warriors wouldn't have any advantages against these ice ants. Unfortunately, the ice ants met the bug in this world, Wang Teng. He possessed multiple elements, and his Brigadier General level fire force was powerful enough to tackle his opponent's ice force. The fire force flowed through his body, turning it into a furnace. All the coldness was dispelled. The ice ant opposite felt the scorching heat. It turned a little anxious and wanted to stay away from the heat source. At the same time, two more Lord-level ice ants dashed out from the cave and hurled themselves at Wang Teng. Wang Teng stared intently at them and caught the antenna of the ice ant in front of him. He tapped his feet on the ground and landed on top of the ice ant's head. The other two ice ants rushed out from the side and collided with each other. Their heads were spinning. Wang Teng burst out laughing. He slammed his fist down on the ice ant below him. The emerald-glazed flame covered up his fist as it pierced through the ice ant's body with its scorching heat. The ice ant raised its head frantically and wanted to throw Wang Teng down. But as the emerald-glazed flame invaded its body, the crystal-clear shell of the ice ant gradually turned red, and hot air rose from its body. The ice ant was cooked. The other two ice ants saw the tragic state of their comrade and naturally felt fearful. They kept retreating. Wang Teng leaped down from the ice ant's head and landed in front of the two ice ants. He released both his fists at once. Boom! Boom! The green flame exploded, enveloping the two ice ants. They burned furiously. The two ice ants rolled on the ground, wanting to extinguish the fire. Unfortunately, the emerald-glazed flame wasn't a normal flame, so it couldn't be put out so easily. Very soon, the two ice ants turned into ashes within the green flames. A few attribute bubbles were dropped. Ice Force *560 Ice Force *380 blank attribute *720 Advanced Stage Ice Talent *186 Ice Force *450 blank attribute *640 Advanced Stage Ice Talent *222 Good riddance. These Lord-level ice ant were the main course. This was a great harvest. Wang Teng's Ice Force had jumped from the 7-star to the 8-star soldier level. Ice Force, 2257,000, 8-star, within a few hours, his Ice Force rose from 7-star to 8-star. A normal person would feel that this was a dream. At the same time, he accumulated 6,300 points of blank attributes. He felt more at ease with his savings. Once again, Wang Teng was a rich man with savings. However, seeing the last advanced stage ice talent bubble, his good mood was gone. 222 points. System, are you serious? 1. I have already collected this bubble, so I have to take it. If not, I won't accept this atrocious number. I have my dignity. Wang Teng accepted the bubble in frustration. Suddenly, he looked towards the entrance. Under the influence of the poison smoke, a bloated body was slowly moving out of the nest. It was the queen ant. Wang Teng turned vigilant. This queen ant was at mid-tier lord level. He wondered how powerful it was. He should be careful. Soon, he discovered that the queen ant didn't crawl out by itself. More than 10 ice ants were carrying it out step by step. It was like a fatty that couldn't move by itself. Wang Teng's expression turned strange. He didn't know how this queen ant was going to fight. Was it going to smash him with its bloated body? His imagination ran wild. With the help of the ice ants, the queen ant finally arrived at the entrance. A large number of ice ants scurried out from the nest after it. They surrounded the queen ant and looked at Wang Ting vigilantly. Without any warning, a strange airwave came out of the queen ant's mouth. It spread out in circles. What is it doing? Wang Ting didn't feel any attack. He frowned in confusion. But the next instant, the ground shook suddenly, and loud noises came from the sky above him. Large patches of snow fell on him. Wang Ting raised his head and squinted his eyes. What the F***K? Avalanche. Wang Ting couldn't help but curse. He stared at the queen ant in disbelief. Was this phenomenon created by the airwaves just now? 1. In Chinese, the number 2 can mean stupid. Chapter 570 Only a small improvement. Wang Ting was startled when he heard the loud noises above. Avalanche. The queen ant had created an avalanche. Wasn't she afraid of getting buried by it? Wang Ting immediately soared into the air. It wouldn't be fun if he was buried alive. However, the queen ant would never let him off so easily. The airwaves became more and more violent as they rippled out. Boom! Ice and snow were rolling down, and the ice sheets swept down above his head. The worst thing was that the ice and snow seemed to be targeting Wang Ting. The ice and snow didn't go anywhere and slammed towards the top of his head. Wang Ting's face turned dark. He didn't expect the ant queen to deal him a blow like this. It didn't make a sound and immediately used its ultimate move. It was more crafty than he was. Bah, other people were the crafty ones, not him. Wang Ting lowered his head and looked at the queen ant. It stared back at him as well. Ah, Wang Ting sneered. The emerald-glazed flame burst out and surrounded his body. The ice and snow seemed to be under the queen ant's control as they condensed into a huge icicle, with icy cold light flashing at its tip. Wang Ting saw that, and his spiritual power gushed out. Using the control techniques of a divine spirit master, he condensed the emerald-glazed flames into one place. Roar! A majestic and powerful emerald dragon emerged from the flames. The compact scales on its body seemed real. Go! Wang Ting shouted coldly. The emerald dragon rose into the sky, facing the horrifying avalanche. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The power of the flames surged, melting the ice and snow. The icicle was instantly melted as a path was opened up in the middle of the avalanche. When the surrounding ice and snow fell, Wang Ting was unharmed as he stood in the middle of the sky. His hair and clothes were flapping in the wind. He looked down and realized that the ice ants had been completely buried. However, with his spiritual sight, he could still see that they were alive. Ice and snow couldn't do any damage to them. I see. An avalanche can not only stop and kill me but also cover their tracks for them to escape. Wang Ting's eyes flashed as he snickered. A Lord-level star beast is not that stupid after all. Unfortunately, you have made the wrong move. As Wang Ting stood in midair, the emerald-glazed flame condensed into a flame spear, locking onto the traces of the ice ants. He then waved his hand, and countless flame spears shot straight down. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. There were sounds of air crackling as the flame spears cut through the sky and pierced the thick layers of ice, nailing the ants down onto the ground below. After exterminating all of the ants, Wang Ting collected the attribute bubbles that they had dropped. Ice Force *320 blank attribute *130 Ice Force *170 blank attribute *89 Advanced Stage Ice Talent *38 Ice Force *250 blank attribute *140 Finally, Wang Teng's gaze locked onto the queen ant. Its bloated body landed on the ground, unable to move at all. Besides, after using the avalanche once, it seemed like within a short period of time, it couldn't use the same move again. Wang Teng also noticed this abnormality. He looked at the queen ant like it was a lamb about to be slaughtered. His expression suddenly became weird. Is this queen ant really so weak? Just one hit. This queen ant was probably the weakest Lord-level star beast in history. If the queen ant knew what Wang Teng was thinking, it would probably vomit blood in frustration. Ordinary martial warriors couldn't even get close to her. The swarms of ice ants were enough for the intruders to get more than what they had bargained for. The strength of the ice ants was in their number. These ice ants were all offspring of the ant queen. It was strong because of its terrifying reproductive ability. Giving birth to large numbers of powerful ice ants to serve itself was its most powerful means. But there was nothing else to say since it had encountered Wang Teng, the bug. It wasn't weak, just that its opponent was too strong. Wang Teng shook his head and dealt with the poor ant queen mercilessly. A large number of attribute bubbles appeared above the snow. Ice Force *1430 Ice Force *1380 Blank Attribute *1600 Advanced Stage Ice Talent *420 Avalanche *1 Emperor Realm Spirit *380 Wang Teng was a little surprised. The Queen Ant had dropped quite a lot of attribute bubbles. It even dropped Emperor Realm Spirit attribute bubbles. Wang Teng was in a bit of disbelief. The Queen Ant's spiritual power had actually reached the Emperor Realm. It was rare for an ordinary human runemaster to reach the Emperor Realm. This Queen Ant was gifted. He then looked at his force attributes again. This time, he had obtained 2,810 points of Ice Force from the Ant Queen. Adding the ones he got by killing the other ice ants, it was an extremely huge amount. Now, Wang Teng's Ice Force had already reached the 8-star soldier level, and he wasn't far away from reaching the 9-star soldier level. Ice Force, 57,000, 8-star, 8,000 more points to go, Wang Teng said to himself as he felt a bit unfortunate. Besides that, there were a full 420 points of advanced stage ice talent. The low-tier Lord-level ice ants had raised his advanced stage ice talent by a lot. With these 420 points, Wang Teng's advanced stage ice talent finally upgraded. Ultimate stage ice talent, 35,000 Wang Teng felt that the essence of his body had undergone some mysterious changes. His body became extremely sensitive to ice force. As he looked at the snow in front of him, tiny dots of ice force gathered towards his body. At this moment, he seemed to have transformed into a prince of snow. Next was the 1,600 points of blank attributes. The number of blank attributes that he had collected by sweeping the ice ant's nest was in the thousands, making his total tally reach 5 figures. Blank attribute, 10,500 Wang Teng's eyes flashed, and he looked at the last attribute bubble. The Queen Ant's skill Avalanche. He didn't expect that there would be a skill amongst these attribute bubbles. Wang Teng couldn't help but wonder what this virtual reality really was. One could argue that the existence of force and blank attributes in virtual reality was because the star beasts were made using force here. However, these skills were the innate abilities of star beasts. They were already rare in the real world, let alone in this virtual reality. This virtual reality was even more mysterious than he had imagined. Wang Teng couldn't understand, so he didn't dwell on it. He shook his head and calmed down. As the attribute bubble was absorbed into his body, the relevant details of the skill appeared in his mind. No wonder the Queen Ant's spiritual power had reached the Emperor Realm. Wang Teng muttered to himself. This skill needed spiritual power. It utilized a special way to create shocks and combined it with the ice talent to control ice and snow, creating an avalanche. The avalanche was not a weak skill among the other ice element battle techniques. The reason it didn't hurt Wang Teng was that he had contained it. However, in Wang Teng's hands, avalanche was different. After all, his spiritual power had reached the Imperial Realm, and the power of his avalanche would definitely increase multiple times. Of course, there were limitations. The skill was best used in snowy mountains like the one here. In other places, it would need huge amounts of ice force to create the ice. Also, it would not have that same impact and momentum from falling from a high area, resulting in a lower effect. In summary, it was a good skill, but it needed the right time and place. This meant nothing much to Wang Teng. One more skill meant one more method for him. It was always good to have more skills. Wang Teng nodded in satisfaction. He suddenly realized that this virtual reality was tailor-made for him. It was too friendly to him. He didn't know what kind of changes would happen to virtual reality if he could connect it to the Skynet. What could he gain from it? With this thought in mind, Wang Teng continued to search the snow-capped mountains. If he could find another nest of ice ants, that would be great. Unfortunately, he could only fantasize about it. Perhaps this nest of ants was the overlord of this snow mountain, and there were no other similar species here. Wang Ting had no choice but to take a step back and see if he could find other ice star beasts. If his ice force could reach the 9-star soldier level before he left virtual reality, it would be a huge gain for him. With less than 3 hours left, Wang Ting scoured through the snow mountain and almost turned it over. In the end, he managed to find 2 or 3 kittens. They weren't Lord level, but they were at least 7-star to 9-star, and they provided him with many Ice Force attributes. Wang Ting's Ice Force had finally broken through and reached the 9-star soldier level. Ice Force, 135 9000, 9-star, he was extremely satisfied with his gains this time around. However, he had wasted a lot of time, and it was too late to rush back to the city now. As soon as it was time, a spot of light appeared in his mind again. "I'm going back." Wang Ting didn't have the time to react before the spot of light sucked him in. His body disappeared from the snow mountain. When he regained his senses, he was already back to reality. Opening the door of the virtual chamber, he sat up, turned his head, and saw that Dan Taishen had just walked out of the virtual chamber. "You didn't return to the city?" Dan Taishen frowned when she saw him. "Ha ha ha, it was a bit too far away. It was too late to go back." Wang Ting remembered her advice and scratched his head in embarrassment. "Looks like you had too much fun killing star beasts." Dan Taishen glanced at him and said. "You got it." Wang Ting was a little awkward. She didn't have to expose him. "How was it?" Dan Taishen couldn't help but ask him when she saw him like this. "It was okay. My strength did improve a little." Wang Ting thought about it and didn't feel that there was anything wrong. Improving his ice force from the 7-star soldier level to the 9-star soldier level was a small improvement for him for his current strength. "In such a short period of time, you actually improved," Dan Taishen said in surprise. "I'm just lucky." Wang Ting laughed. Dan Taishen didn't know what to say anymore. Many people entered virtual reality to fight, mainly to improve their strength. However, it took a lot of time. But this was the first time that Wang Ting had entered virtual reality, and within 10 hours, he actually managed to improve. He made it hard for people to live. Was that what you call a monster? Even with Dan Taixuan's talents, she was hit hard. If she knew what exactly the small improvement was, her reaction wouldn't be this small. She would be in hysteria. Dan Taishen shook her head and didn't say anything on the topic. She reminded, "Whenever you leave virtual reality, even if you don't return to the city, you should find a safe place to stay. Otherwise, the next time you enter, you might face a star beast and get killed immediately. Your spirit will take a hit." Someone encountered that situation before, and it took him a long time to recover. Wang Ting realized what Dan Taishen meant when she kept reminding him to return to the city. That was the reason. Virtual reality was really too advanced. The secrets that it contained could only be unearthed by humans after a long period of exploration. However, for a newbie like him, he still needed to listen to the senior's advice. Otherwise, he would have to suffer losses from his inexperience. "All right. I'll take note of it next time." Wang Ting nodded solemnly. "Are you coming tomorrow?" Dan Taixuan's expression softened when she saw Wang Ting taking her advice. "Of course. I came all the way down to capital Xia. How could I pass up such an opportunity? Fighting star beasts, in reality, would take up too much time, even more so if we are injured. Whereas for virtual reality, as long as we don't get killed, even heavy injuries wouldn't have any great impact on our real bodies. At most, we would only get a little weak. We can recover after a while. Let's come back tomorrow." Wang Ting nodded. After agreeing to meet again, they each went back to rest. Chapter 571. Dan Taishen had a breakdown. Virtual reality. In a valley, Wang Ting was fighting with a giant poisonous toad. The poisonous toad was entirely blackish-purple. There were numerous pustules on its skin, making it look frightening. This toad was at a low-tier lord level. It was powerful, and its poison force made it harder to deal with. Even Wang Ting had a hard time taking this poisonous toad down. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Wang Teng floated in midair in the valley and dodged right and left, evading an extremely agile black shadow. This black shadow came from the mouth of the poisonous toad. It was like an elastic poisonous whip, stabbing and twining around Wang Teng. It formed lingering shadows around Wang Teng. Bang! Wang Teng's speed was amazing. He left afterimages and disappeared. The black shadow penetrated the afterimage of Wang Teng before slamming into the rock wall behind him, leaving a deep hole. There were signs of corrosion at the edges. The black shadow bounced back into the poisonous toad's mouth. It was its tongue. This poisonous toad tongue skill was amazing. Wang Teng found the poisonous toad's tongue a little irritating. It was gross. There was a poisonous and sticky liquid on it that was extremely corrosive. If it landed on him, he would be poisoned. But Wang Teng was resolute. He must kill this poisonous toad. It had taken him a long time to find this poison element star beast. He must defeat it. Wang Teng shifted his gaze, and spiritual power flowed through his body. The emerald-glazed flame formed a large net covering half the sky. It fell towards the poisonous toad. Gulp, gulp. Malicious intent shone in the poisonous toad's eyes. It puffed up its cheeks and made gurgling sounds. Then, it spat out a mouth of poisonous liquid. Splurt. When the poisonous liquid landed on the flaming net, a hissing sound escaped the point of contact. The two objects corroded each other. The poisonous liquid almost made an opening in the flaming net. The emerald-glazed flame was a divine fire, but this poisonous toad was at the Lord level. With its strong poison, it could resist the emerald-glazed flame to a certain extent. But that was it. Wang Teng controlled his spiritual power as he released the emerald-glazed flame continuously out from his body to maintain the form of the flaming net. The next instant, the flaming net shrouded the poisonous toad. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The flaming net enveloped the poisonous toad and burned violently. Burnt marks started to form on its body. The Lord-level poisonous toad croaked in pain. It struggled furiously trying to break free from the flaming net. Tighten. Wang Teng focused his gaze on the net and tightened it forcefully while controlling it with his spiritual power. The poisonous toad made a frightening croaking sound. A strange change was occurring to its body. Poof, poof, poof. The pustules on its body suddenly burst one by one. A large amount of poisonous pus spurted out, attempting to corrode the flaming net. Wang Teng snorted. The emerald-glazed flame burned even more violently. It engulfed the poisonous toad completely. At the same time, ice spears appeared in the air, aimed directly at the poisonous toad below. During the 2 days in virtual reality, Wang Teng often used the skills of a divine spirit master. Compared to the past, he was getting skilled at it. The skills of a divine spirit master were essentially the use of their spiritual kinesis to fight for them. Feeling a life-threatening danger, the poisonous toad struggled even more furiously. Wang Teng remained indifferent, though, as he controlled the ice spears. They shot towards the poisonous toad. The air was compressed, and cracking sounds were heard. The spears seemed to have cut through the air, forming a white line where they passed. A chill spread out in the surroundings. Boom! Instantly, the ice spears pierced through the huge body of the poisonous toad. Croak! The Lord-level poisonous toad gave its last cry of agony. Then, its huge body collapsed, and it died. A few attribute bubbles dropped. Wang Teng kept his emerald-glazed flame and swept the bubbles over with his spiritual power. Poison Force *550 Poison Force *630 Advanced Stage Poison Talent 175 Blank Attribute *860 Wang Teng looked at his attributes panel. He was satisfied with the gains this time. Poison Force, 35,85,000, 7-star. Wang Teng had stayed in virtual reality for 2 days. Most of the time, he was searching for poison element, ice element, and wind element star beasts to kill. Now, his poison force had reached the 7-star soldier level while his wind force was at the 8-star soldier level. They were finally catching up to the rest of his forces. His ice force was still at the 9-star soldier level. After all, there weren't many ice element star beasts that existed in a huge group like the nest of ice ants. He was extremely lucky to have found them. Also, the size of the ant colony wasn't as huge as a normal ant colony. Normally, there were hundreds and thousands of ants in a nest. Some even had a few tens of thousands. If the ice ants existed in such large numbers, the entire snow mountain would be destroyed. The stronger the animals, the lesser the number. Even so, Wang Ting still killed a few ice element star beasts these 2 days. His ice force rose a little, and he was much closer to reaching the Brigadier General stage. Ice force, 43,39,000, 9-star. At the same time, Wang Ting's blank attribute increased tremendously, exceeding 20,000 points. Blank attribute, 21100. Wang Ting kept his attributes panel. He was satisfied. It had been 3 days, and his gains were already amazing. Wang Ting almost couldn't believe it. I should go back. Wang Ting looked at the time. He rose into the air and flew towards the city. In the real world, Wang Ting climbed out from the virtual reality cabin. Dan Taishen had been waiting for some time. When she saw him coming out, she said, "You will be heading to Mount Saint tomorrow, so have an early rest today." Wang Ting nodded. He looked at her happy face and smiled. "It looks like you have made good progress in the past 2 days. Not bad." My cultivation rose a little. A pretty smile appeared at the edge of her mouth uncontrollably. It was obvious that she was in a good mood. Although Dan Taishen wasn't as incredible as the bug, Wang Ting, she was able to make good progress in the short time she spent in virtual reality. This proved that her talent was extremely high. Not bad, as expected of Sister Xian. Wang Ting nodded and praised her. Dan Taishen felt even better. There was a strong sense of achievement when this ultimate talent praised her. "TMPH, do you think you're the only talent in this world?" "I'm not bad either." Dan Taishen raised her head and revealed her fair neck. She felt proud of herself. "I made progress too. My ice force has reached the 9-star soldier level," Wang Ting suddenly said. Dan Taishen. The good mood that just appeared was destroyed immediately. Dan Taishen had a breakdown. A few days ago, when they came to capital Xia, Wang Ting said that his ice force was lacking. In less than 3 days, he had reached the 9-star soldier level. "Are you kidding me? This is a joke, right?" Dan Taishen stared at Wang Ting for a long time, trying to detect a hint of guilt on it. In the end, she was disappointed. Wang Ting remained shameless. He seemed to know what she was thinking, so a wisp of ice force surged out of his body. 9-star soldier level. Dan Taishen turned and left. Her face was as black as the bottom of a pot. This fellow was evil. Wang Ting sniggered behind her. He was tormented by Dan Taishen in the past, so he wanted to get his revenge slowly. Chapter 572. Queen Phoenix aircraft set out. The next day. At the airport in capital Xia military district. A pitch-black Rune aircraft was parked on the empty ground outside. The body of the aircraft was sleek, and the edges were defined. With a triangular overall shape, its wings looked like 2 sharp blades. Wang Ting's eyes lit up when he saw this aircraft. A man liked cars. But he loved aircraft more. This black aircraft was noticeably more advanced and high-class than the one he took in the past. Comparing it to cars, the one he took to here was just a normal car, while this aircraft was the Lamborghini and Ferrari among the sports cars. "Do you like it?" A light-hearted voice sounded in his ears. "Commander Hong." Wang Ting saw the skinny elder walking towards him and greeted him hurriedly. "Wang Ting." Commander Long and Commander Yong followed behind Commander Hong. Wang Ting greeted them too. "This is the newest Rune aircraft, Queen Phoenix. Its functions, speed, defense, and rune power are all tip-top. You will need to fly over 2 continents before you reach Mount Saint. Along the way, you might meet powerful star beasts, so this aircraft can help you solve many troubles." Commander Yong saw Wang Ting was sizing up the aircraft with interest, so he smiled and explained to him. "This is the newest aircraft model." Wang Ting was amazed. "Do you want it?" Commander Hong suddenly asked. Wang Ting looked at him in astonishment. He chuckled and replied, "Of course. But, I only dare to think about it. A young man should have some ambition." "There's no need to control your desires so strictly," Commander Hong said. Commander Long and Commander Yong smiled silently. Although Wang Ting was moved, he just stared at Commander Hong without saying anything. "Haha, you little brat." Commander Hong scolded him while laughing when he saw his expression. He went directly to the point. "I'm not going to beat around the bush. If you defeat all the talents from the other countries from your generation, I'll give you a Queen Phoenix aircraft." "Really?" Wang Ting asked in disbelief. This aircraft could be a gift. But since the words came from Commander Hong of the three great commanders, they were highly credible. Dan Taishen gave an envious look when she heard this. This was the newest Rune aircraft model, and only the top-level military troops had it currently. Yet, Commander Hong wanted to give one to Wang Ting. Of course it's true. Commander Hong didn't get angry because of Wang Ting's suspicion. Instead, he chuckled. "Wang Ting, Commander Long and I have witnessed this together. He can't go back on his words." Commander Yong glanced at Wang Ting and smiled. "Haha, I just found it unbelievable." Wang Ting scratched his head and laughed. "What do you think? Are you confident that you can defeat the other talents?" Commander Hong asked. "I have to try to know." Wang Ting didn't make any promises. The three great commanders were instantly disappointed. Their country had never achieved any glamorous results in international events over the years. Hence, they hoped that Wang Ting could give it his all and earn glory. That was why they were willing to throw in this expensive aircraft. But Wang Ting opened his mouth slowly. The three great commanders looked at him. Wang Ting felt his head turning numb from their gazes. He continued hurriedly, "But I think you can start preparing the aircraft." The three great commanders exchanged glances with one another and burst out laughing. Commander Hong pointed at Wang Ting with his finger and said light-heartedly, "All right, we will prepare it for you. Don't disappoint us." "Of course, don't worry." Wang Ting had a sudden thought and asked, "If I get this aircraft, can I fly it in our country?" "Don't worry, we'll help you with the necessary paperwork." Commander Hong waved his hand and replied. Elated, Wang Ting nodded and said, "Thank you." Small case. Wang Ting smiled and kept quiet. To the three great commanders, with their status and position, this was indeed a small case. However, if he had to do it himself, it wouldn't be as simple. Although he would still be able to finish all the paperwork himself with his current identity, he would have to go through many procedures and spend much time. It would be great if Commander Hong could do it all for him. As they spoke, a group of people came over from afar. "They are here." Commander Long opened his mouth and said. Wang Ting turned around and looked at the people who were walking over. To his surprise, there were many familiar faces. They were all his opponents during the martial arts competition. He saw Ren Qingcang, Ji Xiuming, Luo Cheng, and many others. "They are here too." Wang Ting wondered to himself. Others looked a little older. However, they should be less than 25. They were hiding their aura so that normal people wouldn't notice them. Wang Ting activated his spiritual sight and immediately realized that 3 of them had reached the Brigadier General stage. One of them was at the low-tier General stage. As powerful martial warriors, these people weren't famous. This was surprising. They reached the 3 great commanders and saluted them. At ease, the 3 great commanders nodded and said. Ren Qingcang and the other students had noticed Wang Ting too. Their gazes were complicated. It had only been a while since they last saw this young man, but he had already gone far ahead of them. They felt a little embarrassed. Commander Hong saw everyone's gazes. He decided to liven up the atmosphere and introduced, "This is Wang Ting. I'm sure many of you have seen him before, so I won't introduce him further. You can interact with one another along the way." Everyone nodded. "Wang Ting, you will be leading the team this time. You're the team leader," Commander Hong continued. "I'm the team leader." Wang Ting pointed at his nose and shook his head. "Why don't we let someone else be the leader? These people are more powerful than me." He pointed to the 3 Brigadier General stage and the low-tier General stage martial warriors. The martial warriors were stunned. Wang Ting didn't point at them coincidentally. He must have sensed their cultivation stage. If not, why did he point at them among all the people present? At first, when they heard that Commander Hong wanted Wang Ting to be the leader, they were unconvinced. However, because of his unintentional display of power, they started to hesitate. "What do you think?" Commander Hong looked at the four youths. "We have no objections." The four people looked at one another before shaking their heads. Wang Teng was frustrated. These people weren't willing to accept him, so why weren't they voicing out their thoughts? He didn't want to be the leader. It was an arduous but fruitless task that would waste his precious time. If someone stepped out, he could push the role away. Unfortunately, his wish didn't come true. Wang Teng felt a little regretful. The others were speechless when they saw his expression. "We are giving you our acknowledgement by letting you be our leader. Why do you seem so forced?" Commander Hong glared at Wang Teng before he said, "Since there are no objections, you can board the plane." Everyone started boarding the Queen Phoenix aircraft, with Wang Teng taking the lead. "We wish you success." The soldiers below suddenly saluted behind them as they shouted. Wang Teng and the others turned around involuntarily. Then, they stopped in their tracks and returned their salutes with a stern expression. The cabin door closed slowly. The Queen Phoenix aircraft turned into a black shadow as it shot into the air and disappeared over the horizon. Chapter 573, Teaching Them a Lesson. Queen Phoenix. After they boarded, they took their seats. The plane seemed flat and small from the outside, but it was very spacious internally. There was enough space to house everyone, and it wasn't squeezy. There was a comfortable and extravagant resting room in the aircraft with a variety of facilities. To the passengers, this was an enjoyment. Besides the people who were going to participate in the event, there were a few logistics staff present. Dan Taishen tagged along too. She had been to the event before and was more familiar with the situation there. Thus, she accompanied them as their advisor. Wang Teng finally knew her real purpose for coming to Capital Xia. It wasn't as simple as sending him off. At this moment, everyone was sitting in the resting area. The atmosphere was a little quiet. A gathering of the young talented martial warriors wouldn't be harmonious. Instead, sparks of competitiveness flew in the air. But if someone was way out of their territory, this competitiveness would be groundless. Hence, the scene below took place. Ren Qingtsang, Ji Xiuming, Luo Cheng, and Zhao Yuanwu, the up-and-rising talented younger generations during the national #1 martial arts competition, didn't have any thought of comparing themselves with Wang Teng. The other people were the formidable martial warriors hidden in the military. They were all 25 years old. They were considered the younger generations too, but they were a batch before Wang Teng and the other students. These people were past talents. After entering the military, they were specially groomed and had managed to reach the brigadier general stage before 25. One of them had even reached the low-tier general stage. Their cultivation levels were on par with Wang Teng, but they were 5 years older than him. Based on his current progression rate, in 1 year, he would be able to surpass these people until they couldn't catch up. He didn't need 5 years. Hence, when they heard the commanders appointing Wang Teng as their leader, they didn't voice their unhappiness even though they were unconvinced. Dan Taishen noticed the dull atmosphere and realized the reason immediately. She glanced at Wang Teng helplessly. But she was a lazy person and didn't like to interfere in these affairs. Hence, she didn't say anything. On the other hand, a female officer around 30 years old smiled and opened her mouth. "Major General Wang, the talents from the various universities, let me introduce these people to you. This is Yang Bo, Chu Fei, Zhu Yushao, and Mu Zhigua." The female officer pointed at the 4 people and started introducing them. When she pointed at the last man called Mu Zhigua, Wang Teng stared at him for a moment longer. Low-tier general stage. Wang Teng was astounded that there was a low-tier general stage martial warrior in the team. Mu Zhigua sensed his gaze and raised his head, their eyes meeting. The man was quiet and ordinary-looking. His aura was reserved, and he looked extremely normal. No one would believe that he was stronger than the other 3 people. Then, the female officer introduced the students. The 2 parties had a brief understanding of one another. Zhu Yushao smiled and said to Ji Xiuming, "I'm from the first university too. What a coincidence to meet my fellow schoolmate here. Senior sister ZH. Ji Xiuming was surprised and nodded at her. Junior brother Ji is extremely talented. You earned the right to participate in this global event even before you graduated. You are stronger than we were, Zhu Yushao praised. Ji Xiuming felt a little awkward when he heard this. He glanced at Wang Ting secretly and replied, "You're flattering me. Y'all are the main force of our team." Zhu Yushao was slightly stunned. But she quickly regained her senses and smiled in embarrassment. "Let's all work hard together." On the other side, Chu Fei and Yang Bo exchanged glances before sniggering. "Major General Wang, you are our leader this time. If we meet powerful opponents from other nations, we will have to rely on you. I heard that many talented martial warriors have appeared in other nations over the past few years." He was picking a fight. Ren Qingtsang, Ji Xiuming, and many others looked at the ground silently. Having experienced it before, they knew how hard Wang Ting was to deal with. This fellow wasn't an easygoing person. If they dug a hole for him, they themselves might end up in it. Wang Ting glanced at the DUP and knew what they were thinking. Although they seemed to be flattering him, they were actually making things difficult for him. He scoffed in his heart but didn't show it on his face. "You are at the Brigadier General stage. Don't you have enough confidence in yourselves?" The two of them didn't know how to reply to him. At first, they thought that he would agree to them readily, but he shot the question back at them. This question wasn't easy to answer. If they said they weren't confident, they would appear extremely useless. If they said they were, they would need to step out before Wang Ting to fight. After all, as the leader, he should be the last. Their plans went down the drain right away. Their gaze flickered as they tried to think of a way to answer the question. Yang Bo coughed awkwardly and replied, "We were just worried. After all, our opponents are the talents of other nations. We're afraid we will embarrass the nation if we lose to them. However, when we have to fight, we will give it our best. Indeed. This affects the nation, so we won't dare to belittle the challenge ahead of us." Chu Fei agreed with a serious face. "Your thoughts are not bad. Work hard during the event and earn glory for the nation. This is your way to repay the country. If you can't win against your opponent, I'll do something." Wang Ting smiled as he replied. Definitely. When the glory of the country was mentioned, there was nothing they could say. They could only nod and agree. Wang Ting didn't continue. He had taught them a lesson, so this was enough. He left some space for these two people to breathe. Dan Taishen prayed silently for these two martial warriors when she saw this scene. These two didn't have the capability to make Wang Ting suffer. They were still far behind him. Wang Ting had shown them mercy by not embarrassing them too much. Zhu Yushao looked at Wang Ting's smiling face and suddenly felt that anyone who thought that this fellow was easy to bully would suffer greatly. Fortunately, she didn't say anything just now. Otherwise, she would be the one getting embarrassed. Mu Zhiguo remained quiet. There was no expression on his face. He didn't seem concerned about what happened. After suffering a defeat, Chu Fei and Yang Bo realized that Wang Ting had sidestepped their trap perfectly. Instead, they helped him to establish his position as their leader. You could imagine how exasperated they felt. The female officer came out to ease the situation again. At the same time, she was secretly shocked. Major General Wang was young, but he wasn't easy to fool. No wonder the commander asked him to be the leader. "Senior Mu, you should be from the capital military academy, right?" Luo Cheng, who had kept quiet so far, looked at Mu Zhiguo intently and asked. Yes. Mu Zhiguo was stunned for a moment before he realized that Luo Cheng was talking to him. He nodded his head absent-mindedly. "It's really you." Luo Cheng seemed to be confirming something. A hint of happiness appeared on his face. He continued, "I heard many things about you from the principal and the heads." A yearning look appeared in Mu Zhiguo's eyes. He seemed to be reminiscing about the past. "How are they?" Chapter 574. Crossing the Paziria Plains. Everyone's attention was attracted to Luo Cheng and Mu Zhiguo's conversation. Mu Zhiguo seemed to have some stories about him. Everyone felt curious. "The principal and the heads are well. They often talk about you," Luo Cheng replied hurriedly when he noticed that Mu Zhiguo seemed a little emotional. I was too stubborn in the past. I disappointed them, Mu Zhiguo said after a moment of silence. They don't blame you. If they were in your shoes, they would have done the same thing, Luo Cheng comforted him. Never mind, it has been many years. There's no use talking about it. Mu Zhiguo shook his head and turned silent again. Luo Cheng opened his mouth. Seeing that Mu Zhiguo didn't want to speak anymore, he sighed in his heart. It was inappropriate for him to speak further. When the two of them stopped talking halfway through the story, the people around them felt frustrated. Even Zhu Yushao and Yang Bo, who had been interacting with Mu Zhiguo for 3 years, didn't know his past. Wang Ting smiled and said, Senior Mu, your cultivation is the highest among us. We'll need your help when we arrive. You're stronger than me, Mu Zhiguo glanced at him and replied. Yang Bo and Chu Fei knew how powerful Mu Zhiguo was. So hearing his assessment of Wang Ting, they were shocked. They did hear some rumors of Wang Ting, but since they didn't witness him in action personally, they felt that they were exaggerated. After hearing Mu Zhiguo's words, they wondered if Wang Ting was honestly so powerful. Boom! Just when everyone was having their thoughts, the plane vibrated slightly, and a loud sound was heard from outside. What happened? Everyone frowned and asked. The female officer was wearing a headset. She received a report and explained, It's all right. We collided into a star beast. It has been settled. No one was worried. They weren't weak themselves, so even if the aircraft was destroyed, they had the ability to protect themselves. However, they were only halfway through. If they got struck down by a star beast before they reached their destination, the other countries would laugh at them. Where are we? Dan Taishen opened her mouth and asked. We have entered Daxiong country's territory and are at the southeast of Paziria Plains. The female officer looked up their location before replying, asked them to be careful. The natural ecology in this zone is perfect for the star beasts. It's the heaven of star beasts, Dan Taishen said sternly with a sharp gaze. Understood. The female officer nodded before turning to walk out of the resting room. Get some rest. We will wake you up when we arrive, Dan Taishen said. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden star beast attack, so they didn't continue anymore. They closed their eyes and started resting. Wang Ting followed others' example and also closed his eyes, sitting cross-legged on the sofa. He cultivated as he released his spiritual power to feel the outside world. This was his first time traveling so far in this world. He was extremely unfamiliar with the place, so it made him very curious. Dan Taishen was right. The natural ecology of the plains they were flying above was blossoming. There were many lives below, and the aura of star beasts could be felt everywhere. Suddenly, his expression changed. He had noticed something. Wood force *30 metal force *80 blank attribute *15 wood force *65 blank attribute *80. There were numerous small and big attribute bubbles floating in the plane. Wang Ting's expression turned weird. He didn't expect to pick up bubbles for free. Why was he so lucky recently? Wang Ting wondered to himself. Then he swept the bubbles over quickly with his spiritual power and picked them up. The plane's speed was fast, so Wang Ting could only sweep the planes down below with his spiritual power once. Nonetheless, he still managed to gain a large number of bubbles. It was a windfall. All his forces grew. Even his blank attributes rose by a few thousand points. This was a huge earning for him. Dan Taishen felt Wang Ting's spiritual power. She opened her eyes to look at him and saw a smile at the corner of his lips. He seemed to be thinking of something happy. She felt puzzled. What was there to be happy about? She didn't know that in this short moment, Wang Ting's ability had improved by a sizable gap. Huh! Wang Ting suddenly muttered to himself softly. Ultimate Stage Wood Talent *5 An ultimate stage talent had appeared. Wang Ting was surprised and overjoyed. This gain was unexpected. There seemed to be a star beast with ultimate stage wood talent living in this plane. He knew clearly that these attribute bubbles were dropped by the countless star beast in the plane below. Hence, there must be a star beast with ultimate stage wood talent below. Wang Ting silently marked the location where he picked up the ultimate stage wood talent in his mind. He planned to come back and take a look when he had the time. Along the way, Wang Teng didn't just pick up attribute bubbles. He also discovered a few powerful auras from star beasts. In half an hour, he sensed almost 30 star beasts that had reached the Lord level stage. Some of their auras were on par with the 3 great commanders. It was frightening. Wang Teng turned more and more serious. He started to feel that the outside world was very dangerous. However, he didn't know that when he swept the plains with his Imperial Realm Spirit, the star beasts below thought that it was a powerful flying animal soaring past them. Although they were alarmed, they didn't attack because they thought he was just passing by. Thus, their journey was exceptionally smooth. It was so smooth that the pilot of the aircraft found it unbelievable. After some time, the plane vibrated gently. Everyone opened their eyes, ending their rest. The female officer walked over and said, "We have arrived. Finally." They were all a little tense during the journey. Thus, when they heard they had arrived at their destination, they heaved a sigh of relief. "Let's go. The local military has already sent people to fetch us." Dan Taishen stood up and scanned the crowd. Suddenly, she paused for a moment and said to Wang Teng, "Change into your military uniform." Wang Teng looked at himself before glancing at the others. He realized that they were all in uniform. He was the only one in casual attire. Pouting, he went to the bathroom helplessly. He quickly changed into his military uniform. Fortunately, he had kept his Major General uniform in his space ring. If not, he wouldn't have anything to wear. A few moments later, Wang Teng came out of the bathroom. He had already changed into a dark green Major General uniform. He looked handsome and dignified with an exceptional aura. As he walked, he gave off an outstanding vibe. Dan Taixuan's eyes lit up slightly. She nodded in satisfaction and walked out of the plane. "Major General Wang, you look handsome like this." Zhu Yushao leaned over and chuckled. She was walking behind Wang Ting. Wang Ting glanced at her. Of course. Zhu Yushao was stunned. Other people would have remained humble, but Wang Ting appeared as if he deserved the praise. This person's skin was really thick. Shameless. Zhu Yushao had a new understanding of Wang Ting. Yang Bo, Ji Xiuming, and the others pretended that they didn't hear anything. They gave no comments regarding this person's shamelessness, but their hearts were filled with contempt. The cabin door opened. A group of people was waiting below. As Dan Taishen and Wang Ting came down the stairs, the people came to greet them. A man with a large beard and defined features said, "Welcome." He was speaking in Chinese. "Parik, I didn't expect you to welcome us," Dan Taishen said to the person who came. "Dan Taishen, long time no see." The man with a large beard, Parik, knew Dan Taishen. He smiled and started chatting with her. Although he was speaking Chinese, his accent was a little strange. It sounded a bit inaudible. Wang Teng didn't find it weird. This was how most foreigners spoke. When they spoke other languages, the foreigners probably felt the same way too. Parik led everyone onto a few cars. Dan Taishen, Wang Teng, and Parik were in the first car while the others were separated in the cars behind them. They headed straight for Mount Saint. This journey was considered diplomacy. The process was more tedious than what Wang Teng expected. Luckily, he didn't have to worry about this. The female officer followed them, so she was in charge of talking to Parik. After a long car ride, they finally arrived on Mount Saint. Mount Saint was a large snow mountain with a long history and many mythologies. Throughout history, people endowed it with numerous legends and myths. This place was worshipped by many, making it even more holy than it already was. Especially after the era of martial arts started, the legends were given a new lease of life. Mount Saint's status rose to its peak. When they got out of the cars, an ancient brownstone pavement appeared in front of them. "Everyone, we have arrived below Mount Saint. From here, we can only climb up on foot," Parik said apologetically. Chapter 575 Allays. The group didn't have any doubts about Parik's words. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Mount Saint was a belief of the locals. It was worshipped by them and was held in high regard around the world. It should be given its due respect. Besides, they were all martial warriors. No matter how tall Mount Saint was, it wouldn't pose a problem to them. Everyone went up the steps. The brown steps were old and ordinary, exuding a tinge of sorrow. Parik led the way in front while having a conversation with Dan Taishen. He treated the steps like he was walking on flat ground. Suddenly, he turned and smiled at Wang Teng. "Major General Wang Teng, you should be under 20 years old, right? I'm actually 25 years old. I'm just growing too slowly and a bit youthful." Wang Teng solemnly spouted nonsense. If he hadn't read information about Wang Teng, he would have believed it. The pride of country Xia seemed a little frivolous. Dan Taishen rolled her eyes at Wang Teng. This guy was embarrassing his country in a foreign land. Ren Qingtsang, Ji Xiuming, and the others already had nothing more to say to Wang Teng. That sudden act of coy almost made them break their backs. Parik secretly judged Wang Teng in his heart and laughed. "Major General Wang is really humorous. You're flattering me." Wang Teng laughed. Parik's mouth twitched as he saw Wang Teng's happy-go-lucky attitude. This guy was fooling around with him. "Please introduce us to the myth of Mount Saint. I'm very curious about that." Wang Teng didn't care and changed the topic. Parik's eyes flashed, and he reacted immediately. He originally wanted to get some information out of him, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he was led astray by Wang Teng. He smiled bitterly in his heart but kept a poker face as he smiled politely. "All right. Let me tell everyone about the myth. It starts more than 1,000 years ago. It was only folklore in the beginning, but after it was passed down for generations, it became a story that poets and writers recorded down in their poetry, drama, history, philosophy, and other works. These were then compiled into books and gradually became the various myths we have today. Ji Xiuming and the others didn't know much about the origin. As Parik explained, they gradually became enthralled by it. Myths were manifestations of people's good wishes. Of course, it was also possible that people had seen and felt something. They then started fantasizing about something that didn't exist in reality. Wang Teng had a thought. Could the gods, titans, and those mythical beings mentioned in legends be traces left by humongous star beasts or aliens who had once stepped foot on Earth? They were seen by their ancestors, and the encounters were passed down for generations and gradually evolved into myths and legends. What Wang Teng didn't know was that in recent years, sentiments like this had already surfaced, and they were welcomed by many. Everyone continued to climb up. It didn't take long before they reached the middle of the mountain. They hadn't made it to the peak yet. When they reached the middle, everyone seemed to have stepped into another world. The mountainside in front of them was extremely wide, and it looked like a unique Western town. There were many cultural buildings from different eras here. Those who had studied history would find that these buildings spanned at least 1,000 years. Colosseum, arena, clock tower, colonnades, residences, and other unique Western architecture slowly unfolded in front of everyone's eyes, like a scroll of painting. No one expected to see such a peculiar sight in the middle of the mountainside. There was a look of surprise in everyone's eyes. Wang Teng seemed to have found something and looked at the ground. The others couldn't see anything, but his gaze penetrated the ground and found runes hidden underneath. "I see." Wang Teng's mouth arched slightly. The town was hidden by rune arrays. The things they were seeing now might not be the same things that ordinary people could see. Wang Teng felt and noticed a faint spatial fluctuation. The array involved spatial fluctuations. Wang Teng was amazed as he looked around and came to a realization. No wonder there was such a huge space halfway up the mountainside. It's space expansion. Everyone, we are here. The accommodation has been arranged, and you will be staying here tonight. Parik didn't know that Wang Teng had seen what was behind the town. Still pleased with himself, he led the way ahead. As everyone entered the western town, they could feel the bustling atmosphere as people walked about in the lively streets. This was Wang Teng's first encounter with foreign customs. He stared around in curiosity and saw many interesting things. Various vendors were crying out. Some sold fruits, and some sold little gifts. The rich aroma of local delicacies wafted through the air. There were all kinds of food, and it was too much for his eyes to feast on. "Don't you find it very special?" Parik saw his expression and laughed. "It's interesting." Wang Teng nodded without denying it. During the exchange event, you can go for a walk and do a little sightseeing. It will be even more beautiful at night. Parik smiled. If you are lucky, all of you might even have a beautiful encounter. Oh! Wang Ting's eyes lit up as he wrapped his arm around Parik's shoulder enthusiastically and said despicably, "Brother Parik, tell me. There must be a perfect place to have beautiful encounters. Please give me some advice." Parik was a little stunned by Wang Ting's sudden behavior. When did he have such a good relationship with this brat? But Parik couldn't tell that this brat was the same type of person as him. He went stiff for a moment. He then relaxed and looked around before whispering to Wang Ting with a smile, "You can go to the Saraka district. It's a famous shopping district with lively old streets, which are all lined with boutiques, souvenir shops, specialty shops, restaurants, cafes, and pubs. There are theaters and museums too. Beautiful girls always love that kind of place." Wang Ting's eyes became brighter as he listened. He couldn't stop nodding his head as he humbly accepted his senior's advice. Beside them, Yang Bo, Zhao Yuanwu, and the others strained their ears, wanting to hear something. Even Ji Xiuming and Mu Zhiguo were attracted to the conversation and seemed to be on the verge of making a move. The several girls in their group couldn't help but roll their eyes as they despised these stinky, lustful men. "The two of you, enough." Dan Taixuan's face was dark. These two bastards were having a conversation about this kind of thing in front of them as if no one was around. Did they not exist? Wang Teng and Parik immediately coughed and separated from each other. They exchanged glances, and meaningful smiles appeared on their faces. "Brother, let's go at night." "Brother, you can say whatever you like." Parik brought them to a hotel that had a local touch and arranged for them to stay in it. Everyone had a luxurious and comfortable room to themselves, along with great service. The hotel was built on the edge of a cliff. With the curtains opened, you could see the blue ocean from a distance along with magnificent scenery. Everyone had their dinner in the hotel. Before leaving, Dan Taishen said, "Everyone can go out for the night, but don't give me any trouble." As she said this, she looked directly at Wang Teng. "Why are you looking at me? I'm an honest guy who has never caused any trouble." Wang Teng grumbled. "Talents from all over the world are gathered here. It will be chaotic these few days. When you go out, you will have to keep in touch with each other," Dan Taishen reminded nonchalantly and left on her own. "Wang Teng, what did Parik say to you just now?" Zhao Yuanwu asked him when Dan Taishen was further away. "You want to know?" Wang Teng glanced at him and snickered. "Ask him yourself." He ignored the guy and swaggered away. He didn't care if Zhao Yuanwu was gritting his teeth behind him or if his face was filled with rage. This guy is not sharing the good stuff with others. Zhao Yuanwu roared. Everyone looked at him like an idiot. It would be embarrassing to announce the good stuff to everyone. Even if he didn't share it with us, he's the one who got the information. Don't blame him when you are too embarrassed to get it yourself. Although they wanted to know as well, it was hard for them to say it out loud. Everyone left on their own after shaking their heads. Zhao Yuanwu was furious, but he couldn't do a thing about it. He was fortunate to have been selected for the exchange event. His strength had recently improved, and he must perform well in the exchange event and make a name for himself by defeating talents from other countries. But it turned out that Wang Ting was here as well, and he even became their leader. He suddenly lost his voice. He didn't dare to fight Wang Ting head-on. Night fell, and the stars twinkled in the sky. The small town was already brightly lit, and the place was still lively. There were few differences between the day and night. In fact, the atmosphere at night seemed to be even better. Wang Ting roamed the streets, with a few skewers of barbecued meat in his right hand and a burrito in his left. He was eating happily as his eyes wandered everywhere. Parik didn't lie to him. There were beautiful girls everywhere. Blonde hair, blue eyes, tall, slim, and those curves. TSK, TSK, TSK. Wang Ting sucked in his saliva. The food in his hands was too fragrant. He couldn't resist himself. The food here was very unique. Since they were made differently, they naturally tasted different. For a foodie like him, tasting all the food was part of his routine. Moreover, as a force chef master, He also considered this to be a search for ingredients. Force chef *80 force chef *100 Many vendors on the streets were force chefs, so Wang Teng collected a lot of attribute bubbles. He felt that meeting beautiful ladies was not the priority tonight. He needed to appreciate the local customs, or else, it wouldn't feel like he had traveled overseas. He stumbled upon a museum on his stroll. The museum was extremely huge, and it looked a bit gloomy in the dark. However, there were still people entering and leaving it. It was still open at night. Wang Teng took a bite of his barbecued meat and a sip of his drink before walking in. His burrito had already been replaced by the drink. He was curious as to what would be displayed in a museum here. Could it be items that were mentioned in the myths? Wang Teng laughed at himself. The interior of the museum was large. Wang Teng admired the displayed artifacts as he walked in. Most of the things outside were oil paintings and ancient works of art. Although they were out of the ordinary, they couldn't attract this attention. Just a look was enough for him. The further he went inside, Wang Teng realized that the objects on display were getting fewer. Some items appeared only after a long distance. However, the collections inside had piqued Wang Teng's interest. At this moment, he was in front of an ancient long sword and stared at it for 3 minutes. As to why he took so long, it wasn't because it looked good. Killing intent *50 killing intent *95 killing intent *70 This sword is said to be left by an extremely cruel tyrant. It was stained with blood and filled with ill omen. When ordinary people approach it, they will feel uncomfortable and leave quickly. But you have been staring at it for 3 minutes straight. Why? Just as Wang Teng was engrossed in collecting the attribute bubbles, a graceful and lovely voice came from behind. Just by hearing that voice, Wang Teng could guess that its owner was definitely a beautiful woman. However, he didn't pay attention to that as he looked over in surprise. He hadn't noticed someone approaching him. About 3 or 4 steps away from his back, there was a girl with a black veil standing there. It was as though she was blended in with the air. If she hadn't spoken just now, he might not have been aware of her existence. Wang Teng's pupils shrank, and countless thoughts drifted through his mind. Suddenly, he grinned and asked, "How long have you been looking at me?" 5 minutes. The girl had long blonde hair and azure pupils. Looking at Wang Teng with her soft eyes, she replied in a gentle voice. "After looking at me for so long, did you notice anything? Am I handsome?" Wang Teng smiled, like a bad guy trying to entice a little girl. "You're special. Based on my aesthetic standard, you are considered a handsome guy." The girl gave it a serious thought and replied. Considered, Wang Teng's mouth twitched. This was the first time he had gotten such a reply. He was wondering if he should thank her for her approval. "You haven't told me the reason why you have been staring at the sword." "It's because I think it looks good." Wang Teng diverted his gaze and bluffed. "How so?" The girl walked up and stood beside Wang Teng. Frowning, she looked at the rusted long sword on display. "I think it's ugly. Sometimes beauty might not be in its appearance, but in its utility. To me, this sword is a pleasant surprise," Wang Teng said meaningfully. The girl looked at Wang Teng and nodded. "My name is Alaise. Nice to meet you." Wang Teng. Wang Teng stretched his hand out. Seeing Wang Teng's palm, she seemed to understand. She then reached out her white palm and shook his hand. After introducing each other, Wang Teng let go of her hand, taking one last glance at the sword. Confirming that it had reached its limit today and would no longer drop attribute bubbles, he turned and walked towards the depths of the museum. Alaise followed behind him and didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Chapter 576 Crystal Skull. Walking in the quiet corridor of the museum, Wang Teng's footsteps could be heard loudly. The young lady called Alaise followed behind him with light footsteps. She didn't make a single sound. She was like a beautiful ghost. Wang Teng was confused. Why was this unfamiliar young lady following him? Was she curious about him? Wang Teng didn't chase her away. He himself was a little curious about her. He had used her spiritual sight to scan her just now. This young lady was a normal person. To hell with being normal. Wang Teng didn't believe this result at all. He felt that he must have seen wrong. He used his spiritual sight to look at the lady a few more times, but the result was the same. This didn't make sense. She appeared like a ghost just now. Was he just too careless? Wang Ting found it impossible. Hence, he must find out what happened. Even if he didn't, having a beautiful golden-haired lady touring the museum with him was like having free accompaniment. Why not? Alaise, are you a local? Wang Ting turned and asked. Yes, Alaise's voice was as lovely as ever. She looked at him and said, You're from country Xia? Are you here for the Global Exchange Conference? Yes, I just came today. Wang Ting didn't hide it. Talents from all around the world gather on Mount Saint. There will be a fierce struggle. But, you're very strong. Alaise looked at him carefully and said. You can tell? Wang Ting was surprised. I can't. But, I can feel it. Alaise pointed at her head. Alaise, you're not a normal person, right? Wang Ting asked again. The golden-haired lady smiled gently. Her eyes were like the stars, angelic and deep. She didn't say anything. Wang Ting understood in his heart. He stopped asking and continued strolling in the museum, looking for items that could drop attributes. He had gotten a taste of success from the sword just now. That was more than 800 points of killing intent. Killing intent, 43,27,000, 7-star. After a long period of accumulation, his killing intent had reached the 7-star level. During the Sea Beasts riot, he had made use of the killing intent from the Donghai martial warriors to gather an extremely powerful killing intent. That was how they resisted against the auras of a large number of sea beasts. If he raised his killing intent level to the 9-star, he would be able to get the same effect all alone. Unfortunately, the ancient sword was an artifact, so there was a limited number of attribute bubbles it could drop. After all, it had existed for thousands of years and wasn't as glorious as it was before. Wang Ting was curious as to how many people the sword's owner had killed in the past for it to have such a frightening killing intent. Even until today, the sword continued to drop killing intent attributes. Wang Ting didn't see any other items that dropped attributes thereafter. He was extremely disappointed. There was only one last exhibition room left. It was situated in the deepest part of the museum. However, Wang Ting wanted to leave. He was starting to get bored. Although the items here were strange, most of them were ordinary things. The ancient sword was considered a half-martial arts item. It was just a normal weapon, but it managed to last until today because of its special material. Also, it could form killing intent because it had tasted the blood of too many people. But since he was here, he didn't mind visiting one last room. Wang Ting entered the room slowly and scanned it. Suddenly, he stopped. Attribute bubbles. To his surprise, he found another item that could drop attributes in the last exhibition room. Wang Ting was caught between laughter and tears. Were they playing with him? Suddenly, he hastened his pace and went forward. Alaise was puzzled. She wondered why he was suddenly in a hurry. When he got nearer, Wang Ting saw that the item dropping the attribute bubbles was called a crystal skull. He was bewildered. Multiple attribute bubbles were scattered beside the crystal skull. In the short time he took to walk over, another attribute bubble was added to the collection. He picked it up. Wang Ting picked the attribute bubbles without any hesitation. Imperial Realm Spirit *3 Imperial Realm Spirit *1 Imperial Realm Enlightenment *2 Imperial Realm Spirit *1 When he saw the words on the attributes panel, he was dumbfounded. The attribute bubbles dropped by the crystal skull consisted of enlightenment and spirit. Moreover, they were both at the Imperial Realm. This was unbelievable. Was this crystal skull alive? Wang Ting looked at the crystal skull in front of him with an ambiguous expression. He was in a daze. Alaise saw his expression and explained, it said that this crystal skull is a relic from the ancient Maya civilization. It's the same size as a human skull, and there were 13 skulls dug out in total. They are scattered all over the world. Some belong to people's private collections while others are displayed in various museums. Some were destroyed because they were regarded as unlucky items. But these are just rumors. The owners might have spread the rumors because they don't want people to know the location of these skulls. Some people think that this crystal skull doesn't belong to Earth. Instead, it came from outer space, Maya civilization. Wang Teng repeated unconsciously. Many scholars feel that the Maya civilization is an advanced ancient civilization. The archaeologists have found numerous interesting items in the Maya temples. Some of them have signs of cultivation, Alays added. Advanced ancient civilization. Wang Teng was shocked. This crystal skull was able to drop spirit and enlightenment. Did this mean that cultivation existed in the Maya civilization? You seem to know a lot. Wang Teng said knowingly. Alays didn't deny it. Did anyone discover cultivation scriptures in the Maya temples? Wang Teng didn't mind her response. He continued asking. No. All the countries are still in the exploration stage. Some say that another space existed within the Maya temples. That is the real location of the Maya civilization. We just haven't found it, Alays said. Why does it sound like bullshit to me? Wang Teng shook his head. If they continued to guess in that direction, the Atlantis, the pyramids of ancient Egypt, and all the other mysterious ancient civilizations could all be linked to martial arts. Wang Teng stared at the crystal skull. A few seconds later, attribute bubbles dropped again. Imperial Realm Spirit *1 Imperial Realm Enlightenment *2 Imperial Realm Spirit *2 Imperial Realm Spirit *1 He picked them up and left the museum nonchalantly. He bade farewell to Alays. Where do you live? Do you need me to send you back? It isn't safe for a lady to walk alone at night, Wang Teng asked. No need. Alays stopped the man who wanted to send her back. She left quietly and disappeared amidst the night lights in the small town. Wang Teng shook his head. He walked into an empty dark alley and merged into the darkness, disappearing completely. The next instant, a few black shadows appeared at the corner of the street. We lost him. This young man isn't simple. He's a martial warrior from country Shia. Let's go to their hotel to take a look. All right, let's go. Chapter 577 The Secret Inside the Crystal Skull. After the black shadows left, Wang Teng's body appeared once again. A cold smile was hanging at the edge of his lips. He was in deep thought. It looked like Alays' identity wasn't simple. He shook his head, not wanting to think too much. His body merged into the darkness again. Wang Teng went back to the museum. However, this time, he chose to sneak in. He appeared in front of the crystal skull again. This crystal skull was much more mysterious than the ancient sword. It could drop Imperial Realm Spirit and enlightenment directly. Wang Teng decided to sleep here tonight. He wouldn't leave until he drained all the attributes in this crystal skull. Imperial Realm Enlightenment *2 Imperial Realm Spirit *3 Imperial Realm Spirit *1 The attribute bubbles dropped one by one. Although it was a long wait, Wang Teng was extremely patient. He merged into the darkness and sat cross-legged in a corner, resting while picking up attributes. Soon, it was almost 10 p.m. The museum was about to close. The security guards in the museum came over for a routine check. They were all martial warriors, but they couldn't find Wang Teng, who was a general stage martial warrior. After the security left, Wang Teng pondered for a moment and followed them. While one of the security guards was visiting the toilet, he knocked him unconscious and assumed his appearance. Then, he walked into the surveillance room blatantly. You went for such a long time, we thought you fell into the toilet bowl. The security guards in the room laughed and teased him. A sinister smile appeared on Wang Teng's face. Though he kept quiet, a strange glow shimmered in his eyes. He stared into everyone's eyes. Bewitch. The security guards in the surveillance room instantly went into a daze. None of you discovered anything tonight, Wang Teng spoke calmly. Then, he turned around and left the surveillance room. Yes, the security guards in the room replied in unison. Wang Teng went all the way to the display window where the crystal skull was at. He used dark force to cover up the surveillance camera before drilling his spiritual power into the keyhole. He opened the display window. Only a divine spirit master like him would be able to use this high-class and simple stealing method. But if the other divine spirit masters knew that he used his spiritual power for stealing, They might chase him along the streets with a long knife. Wang Ting laughed at himself as he looked at the crystal skull in front of him with shining eyes. He didn't use his hand to touch it. Instead, he lifted it with his spiritual power. The crystal skull floated in front of his face, staring at Wang Ting with its empty eyes. For some reason, when he looked into the empty eyes of this crystal skull, Wang Ting felt as if he was looking at a real human. He frowned uncontrollably. What a strange feeling. Wang Ting took a deep breath and snorted. Let me see what secrets you have. The next moment, he seeped his spiritual power into the crystal skull. Boom. Wang Ting's mind shook. Then, his vision turned bright. A galaxy had appeared in front of him. It was dark and endless. Stars shimmered brightly in the dark galaxy, and a mysterious feeling engulfed him. What is this? Wang Ting was astounded. Disbelief appeared in his eyes. As he sized up the star image, the feeling of disbelief grew stronger and stronger. This looks like a star chart. The stars in front of him formed many different light paths. They were complicated but clear. Wang Ting was in deep thought. He felt that he had discovered something incredible. This was a star chart. Seriously? No. Wang Ting quickly noticed something was wrong. He contemplated for some time before muttering to himself, this is only part of the star chart. It's incomplete. Suddenly, he remembered Alace's words. There were 13 crystal skulls in total. Did this mean that he could only complete the star chart if he gathered all the crystal skulls? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the answer. There was a huge secret hidden in the crystal skulls. His eyes were filled with interest and curiosity. He wanted to investigate further. But soon, he was caught in a dilemma. He couldn't take this crystal skull away. If he stole it, the small town would be in havoc tomorrow. At that time, powerful martial warriors might be sent out to find the crystal skull. It would be impossible for him to keep the crystal skull hidden. He had visited the museum, so he would definitely be treated as a suspect. Wang Ting quickly rejected the thought of stealing the crystal skull. He mustn't be impatient. He would go back and think through this thoroughly. Even if he wanted to steal it, he would wait until he left this place. That way, he would have more freedom. With his ability, he could leave whenever he wanted. No one could keep him. Wang Ting left immediately once he decided. He took one last look at the incomplete star chart before he retracted his spiritual power. He had a premonition that once that complete star chart appeared, it would be something unexpected. Outside, Wang Ting opened his eyes. He was suddenly shocked. His spiritual power had increased a little. Enlightenment, 135,000, Imperial Realm, Spirit, 158,000, Imperial Realm. Before he pushed his spiritual power into the crystal skull, his enlightenment and spirit were at 134 and 157 points, respectively. That meant that both his attributes had increased by 1 point after he entered the skull for that short moment. Wang Ting looked at the crystal skull with his eyes wide open. He took a deep breath. He was having regrets about his decision. He wanted to steal this crystal skull now. Damn it, it could increase his spirit and enlightenment. This was heaven-defying. If he sent his spiritual power inside for nourishment frequently, his spirit and enlightenment would see a steady improvement. Mind you, after his spirit and enlightenment had reached the Imperial Realm, he wasn't able to raise them quickly even by picking up attribute bubbles. After all, there were very few people who had reached a similar realm as him. He didn't have many attribute bubbles he could pick. Wang Ting took a deep breath to calm his restless heart. Finally, logic won over desire, and he placed the crystal skull back in its original position. He left silently. Before he left, he didn't forget to turn back and look longingly at the crystal skull. He would be back. When he returned to the hotel, it was already dawn. He had stayed in the museum the entire night and picked up many spirit and enlightenment attributes. In the room in the hotel, a figure was sitting cross-legged on the bed. This figure looked like Wang Ting. Suddenly, the figure opened his eyes and smiled. "You're back." Another Wang Ting jumped in through the window and nodded. "Thank you." The Wang Ting on the bed nodded. It turned into a ball of black smoke and merged into Wang Teng's body. This was his clone. Wang Teng was well prepared, so he was able to run out without any worry of people checking on him. At this moment, a knock came from the door. Dan Taixian was standing outside. "Get up for breakfast. Everyone is waiting for you." Wang Teng rubbed his face and opened the door. "Let's go. Look at the huge panda eyes. Where did you go last night?" Dan Taixian looked at his face and asked curiously. Ji Xiuming, Luo Cheng, and the others heard Dan Taixuan's words and looked at Wang Teng involuntarily. Their expressions turned strange. "Oh, I met a beautiful golden-haired lady yesterday. I toured the streets with her for the entire night." Wang Teng yawned. "Continue your fantasy." Dan Taixian rolled her eyes. She didn't believe him. Chapter 578 Gathering of the Nations. The hotel had already prepared their breakfast. When they reached the restaurant, the attendants served them their food. The service was considerate and swift. "Where are the people from the other countries?" Wang Teng looked around him and asked. "They are at the other hotels. Every country has its own hotel. This hotel only serves people country Xia," Dan Taixian said calmly as she ate her food. She didn't even raise her head. "Are there many people who came?" Wang Teng nodded and asked again. "Any country that has ambition and wants to display their power will not miss this chance. What do you think?" Dan Taixian glanced at him and asked him back. "It looks like the exchange will be fun," Wang Teng smiled and replied. "Fun?" Everyone glanced at Wang Teng speechlessly. This fellow was quite daring. How could he treat this important event as a game? "Wang Teng, don't be reckless. No one knows what trump cards the other nations have." Ji Xiuming frowned. He hesitated a little, but he still decided to remind Wang Teng in the end. Before Wang Teng could reply to him, another voice was heard from the other side. "TSK, some people become conceited just because they feel they are ahead of everyone. Why do you care about him?" The atmosphere on the dining table froze. Everyone looked back and forth at Wang Teng and Ren Qingcang, who had opened his mouth just now. "Mph." Wang Teng turned and glanced at Ren Qingcang. A smile appeared at the corner of his lips. He shook his head and remained quiet. He was just joking earlier. He wasn't really treating the exchange as a game. He just felt that the duel between the different countries would be exciting. But some people wanted to reprimand him for such a small matter. If Ji Xiuming was reminding him out of goodwill, Ren Qingcang was just asking for trouble. He wanted to use this chance to mock Wang Teng. Wang Teng didn't want to argue with him, though. He continued eating. He was too lazy to even bother. The veins on Ren Qingcang's forehead bulged out. His gaze turned sinister, but in the end, he didn't say anything. After everyone finished eating, Parik came. "Hi, did you have a good rest yesterday?" He smiled and asked everyone. "Not bad," Dan Taixian replied politely. After exchanging some kind greetings, Parik said, "It's almost time. Please follow me." Everyone headed towards a certain place in the small town under Parik's guidance. "Where are we going?" Wang Teng asked curiously. "Just follow him." "Why are you asking so much?" Dan Taixian rolled her eyes. "If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Did you have fun last night?" Parik suddenly leaned over and sniggered, his expression turning ambiguous. "Well, it was all right." Wang Teng raised his eyebrows and replied indifferently. "Are you sure?" Parik was slightly stunned. This fellow was just acting. "Of course. The ladies here are too rough. Their paws and their body frames are too big. They are not gentle enough." Wang Teng found some random excuses to bluff Parik, leaving the guy stunned. Everyone's expression turned weird. In the morning, Wang Teng told them that he had met a beautiful blonde lady. Now, he was playing down the beauties here in front of Parik. This fellow said different things to different people. Parik started arguing with Wang Teng, but he was no match for this wily old fox. In the end, even he started suspecting if the beauties in his country weren't as good as the ones in country Xia. Wang Teng chuckled to himself. He didn't care about the doubt he had injected into Parik's heart. Let him figure it out himself. Everyone soon arrived at the location. They were in the deepest part of the small town. The passers-by around them got fewer and fewer until there were almost none in sight. Wang Ting's gaze turned sharp. He had noticed giant statues of immortals in the distance. Against the mountain background, they appeared tall and lofty, seemingly looking down on the humans below. The statues came in all shapes and sizes. There were males and females. The male immortals were mostly half-naked, revealing the muscles on their bodies. They held weapons with their perfect figures. They were the epitome of the golden ratio. The ladies were covered in veils, and their postures were graceful. They were holding bottles and jars with a peaceful expression as if showering their kindness to the people below. In the middle of these statues, a stone staircase winding straight up was seen. At this moment, many people had gathered below the statues and were talking in low voices. When Wang Teng and his group arrived, the noises disappeared, and everyone looked at them. Country Xia. Many people sized them up sternly. Country Xia had always been a strong country. Their martial warriors were considered one of the best in the world and were a strong competitor for the top 5 positions. Dan Taishen brought everyone closer to the statues and found an empty corner to rest. They didn't greet anyone from the other countries. While the other people were sizing them up, Wang Teng was observing them too. He activated his spiritual sight and scanned the crowd curiously. He saw the levels of these talented martial warriors. Without any exception, the strongest martial warrior among the nations was at the low-tier general stage. There weren't many of them, at most one from every country. The others were mostly at the brigadier general stage. Deactivating his spiritual sight, his gaze shimmered slightly. Every nation had its secrets. To be able to reach the low-tier general stage in their 20s made them the cream of the crop. But this was understandable. There were a few billion people in the world. It wasn't strange that a super-talented person was born in every nation. However, the only person who was able to reach the brigadier general stage before 20 was Wang Ting. Moreover, his ability wasn't limited to the brigadier general stage. You could say that he was the unique one in the entire world. No one was able to see Wang Ting's cultivation stage, but they knew Ji Xiuming and the other stages. When they saw the young faces in this group, the talents from the other countries gave a look of disdain, especially after seeing Ji Xiuming and the students. They hadn't reached the brigadier general stage, so they possessed no threat in the exchange event. However, Mu Zhigua, Chu Fei, and the other soldiers caught their attention. They were the main force of Country Xia's team. After Wang Teng and his group arrived, the martial warriors from the other countries gradually arrived too. It's the martial warriors from Country Inca. Zhu Yushao's voice sounded beside him. Wang Teng turned and looked ahead. A group of people in red robes were walking over. Their expressions were calm, and they gave off a solemn aura. Wang Teng sized up this bunch of people. He was astounded. They are monk martial warriors from Inca, Dan Taishen whispered into his ear. Monks. Wang Teng was stunned. It's not that strange. In Country Inca, monks have a high position. They possess the secret scriptures passed down from ancient times, so they have a natural advantage, Zhu Yushao explained. Wow, I didn't know that, Wang Teng replied in surprise. Then, the other martial warriors started arriving. All the large countries in the world had sent their representatives. In a blink of an eye, the empty ground turned extremely lively and noisy. Chapter 579 Who do you think you are? Talents from all nations gathered on the empty ground below the stone staircase. The atmosphere was tense. They were all set for a showdown. Wang Ting's gaze remained composed. He stood beside Dan Taishen and chatted casually with Parik. After getting fooled by Wang Teng, this man with a huge beard started to feel that the beauties in Country Xia might be better looking than the ones in his nation. He kept probing Wang Ting for more information. Wang Teng was speechless. He felt that he had dug a hole for himself. He wanted to slap himself. Why did he have to boast about his country's beauties? No, he couldn't allow this man to harm the ladies in his country. Are the ladies in your country all as beautiful as Dan Taishen? Parik used voice transmission to ask Wang Teng. He didn't have the balls to say it in front of her. Wang Teng's gaze turned strange. This old rascal had his eyes on Dan Taixian. How bold of him. He asked using voice transmission, "Do you have feelings for her?" "No, no, no. I don't dare to have any feelings towards her." Parik shook his head furiously, denying it with a frightened expression. Wang Teng's expression turned weirder. What had this man experienced? Why was he so frightened? Dan Taixian saw this scene, and a slight frown appeared on her face. She glanced at them curiously. Somehow, she felt that someone was talking behind her back. Wang Teng and Parik shut up immediately. Even though they were using voice transmission to converse, they still stopped talking. Staring at the ground until Dan Taixian turned her head, they sighed in relief. "Parik, I treat you as a friend." Wang Teng didn't use voice transmission this time. He grabbed the man's shoulder and gave him a meaningful look. "There's something I'm not sure if I should say." "Since you treat me as your friend, you can be direct," Parik replied blatantly. "You might not know, but there's one country where the ladies are better than my country," Wang Teng said. "Huh? Where?" Parik's eyes lit up. He asked Wang Teng excitedly. "It's a small nation called Silo." Wang Teng observed Parik's expression after he finished speaking. When he noticed his puzzled face, he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. This world was different from the world he had lived in. Due to the presence of star beasts, the obstacles between the different nations were much worse. Although there were interactions between the bigger countries, it wasn't as convenient as his past life. It was already hard for the bigger nations, so contact with the smaller nations would be even harder. Parik might have heard of Silo, but he wouldn't be aware of the situation there. "The ladies there are prettier?" Parik asked. "If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. You can say so. They have a special kind of beauty with stories behind their backs. If you spend the night with them, there will be a surprise for you the next morning," Wang Teng said mysteriously. "Really? I love ladies with stories." Parik got even more excited. "Yes, you can take a look when you have the time." Wang Teng nodded. Anyway, Silo was indeed a mysterious and magical country. He felt that he wasn't lying to Parik. Of course, whether he liked it or not would depend on himself. He wouldn't promise anything since he had never tried it. He might love that place. "All right, if I have the chance, I will visit that country," Parik said firmly. He had made his decision. Nice. Wang Teng felt that Silo should thank him. After all, he contributed his part in elevating the GDP growth of the nation. Dan Taixian and the others were confused. They didn't know why Wang Teng was introducing Silo to Parik. While they were chatting casually, a group of people walked over. Dan Taixian. The brown-haired man leading the group strode towards them and glanced at everyone. He was tall and muscular, and his steps were energetic. "Yoke." Dan Taixuan's eyes flickered a little as she greeted the man calmly. "White Eagle Nation," Wang Teng thought to himself. "Are these the martial warriors y'all sent out this time? They don't seem very powerful. Look at how soft these youngsters are," the man called Yoke smiled and said. Dan Taixian scanned the young martial warriors behind Yoke and replied in a composed manner, "You will know if they are strong or not after the duel. You never change. You always think so highly of yourself," Yoke said with an ugly expression. He seemed angered by her reply. "So?" Wang Teng's eyes lit up. There was a grudge between Yoke and Dan Taixian. "Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you defeated me in the past. You weren't the champion of the exchange event that year. In the end, you still lost to a martial warrior from our nation," Yoke said with a black face. "You can ask him to come over now. I'll slap him to death." Dan Taixian exploded in anger. That failure was a humiliation to her. How dare Yoke mention it? Wang Teng felt the killing intent and resentment exuding out of Dan Taixuan's body. He hurriedly took a few steps back. An angered woman was extremely frightening. Yoke took a step back uncontrollably too. He looked at Dan Taixian with fear in his eyes. He seemed to have remembered something scary. "If you want to fight with him, You can look for him yourself. Yoke snorted. He looked at the students and sneered. This is the clash of the new generation. I hope the talents from your nation won't lose too miserably. Dan Taixian ignored him. A dangerous glow appeared in her eyes as she turned to Wang Ting and the students and said, "Look at how arrogant he is. Don't you have anything to say?" Everyone was speechless. "You are the one who doesn't like him. Why are you dragging us in?" However, they didn't like what these people said either. Who knew what would happen when they went into the arena? If you see these idiots from White Eagle Nation in the arena, beat them to death. Do you understand? Dan Taixian scoffed. Yes. Wang Ting sniggered and replied loudly. He wasn't afraid of trouble. The other students were irritated by the other party, so they agreed too. Yoke's face turned darker. These people were looking down on them. Beat them to death. How could they be so confident? The martial warriors behind him were also triggered. They glared at the students coldly. You are like little chickens. I can squish you to death with one hand," a handsome man with golden hair snorted. He was standing behind Yoke. "And these little kids who haven't reached the brigadier general stage, are you here for fun?" Another tall man with brown hair smirked. "Foster, Kuhn, don't say that. Don't be so strict towards little kids. Their abilities are good enough. Be gentler on them." A sexy lady with curly hair chuckled. "Especially the young and handsome ones. Don't destroy their beautiful faces." She even winked at Wang Teng, Ji Xiuming, and the other male students. Ji Xiuming and the others remained indifferent. As talented martial warriors, they had seen all kinds of beauties in their country. They wouldn't be seduced by a foreigner easily. Also, their words had ignited anger in their hearts. They had never been belittled like this, even getting treated like little kids. This was unbearable. Chu Fei, Zhu Yushao, and the soldiers placed their hands on the students' shoulders. They were afraid that the students would start fighting in a fit of anger. "Young lady, my skin is very thick. You won't be able to destroy it." A voice suddenly sounded. Ji Xiuming and the students. Zhu Yushao and the soldiers. Dan Taixian. "Can't be destroyed. Stupid brat. Why are you still joking at a moment like this?" The curly-haired lady was stunned. She didn't expect such a reply from Wang Teng. Although other youngsters couldn't stand the provocation, this young man could still maintain the smile on his face. He didn't seem angry at all. "Young lady, I'm very handsome. Why don't you go on a date with me? I don't mind someone older." Wang Teng opened his mouth and spoke again. "Marsha. Despicable." Now, she believed that this young man's skin was indeed very thick, so thick that it couldn't be destroyed. Dan Taixian and the others felt even more speechless. Where did this brat's dignity go? "Brat, take back your words." The golden-haired man called Foster squinted coldly at Wang Teng. "What if I don't?" Wang Teng kept his smile and replied calmly. "I'll let you know what regret means when you step onto the arena," Foster said coldly. His expression was icy too. "Get lost." Wang Teng widened his eyes, and a sharp glint shot out and pierced into Foster's eyes. He was no longer grinning cheekily. Instead, he gave off a terrifying aura like a frightening huge beast that had woken up from its slumber. He sneered. "Who do you think you are?" Foster was scared. Shocked, he took a step back unconsciously. If you continue spouting nonsense, I'll hit you until your parents won't recognize you." Wang Teng looked at the other members from the White Eagle Nation and said, "Same to all of you." The White Eagle Nation team was flabbergasted. They stared at the young man who had turned brutal out of the blue. They were in disbelief. A moment ago, he was still fooling around cheekily. Why did he suddenly turn into a different person? Was this fellow a lunatic? But this fellow's aura. They were fearful. How arrogant. Yoke glared at Wang Teng and snorted. "The youngsters in our country have always been arrogant. Are you unconvinced?" Dan Taixian smiled and asked. The atmosphere between them tensed up instantly. The martial warriors from the other countries looked over as if they were watching a good show. The representatives from the top two nations never liked each other. It was predictable that they would have a conflict when they encountered each other during the exchange. They wondered who would win. At this moment, a person wearing a white gown walked down from the stone staircase. "High Priest of the Holy Temple," someone exclaimed. Parik turned serious. He lowered his head and stood there respectfully. Dan Taishen turned solemn too as she stared at the person in a white gown walking down the stone stairs. The people from White Eagle Nation became quiet. They all looked at the white figure. Chapter 580. Take her down to bring glory to our nation. Everyone's attention was attracted by the appearance of the high priest. When Wang Ting turned his head, his pupils constricted. 12-star general stage. This high priest was a 12-star general stage formidable warrior. Silence. The high priest stopped on the stone stairs. His expression was indifferent, as if he were a member of the clergy with no desires. Scanning the crowd below, his calm voice spread throughout the location. The surroundings turned quiet instantly. Everyone looked towards the high priest. "Everyone, please follow me up the mountain," the high priest continued speaking after everyone quietened down. He turned around and walked up the stairs. The crowd exchanged glances with one another before following him. "Let's go," Yoke scoffed. He led the young martial warriors up the stairs. Foster and Kuhn glared at Wang Ting viciously. The duel hadn't started, so they mustn't lose in the aura. Then, they hurried after Yoke. The curly-haired lady, Marsha, turned and looked at Wang Ting. She winked at him lovingly. "Wang Ting, your luck with ladies is not bad." Parik patted Wang Ting's shoulder and sniggered. As an experienced man, that lady might be flirtatious, but she's still a virgin. "Wang Ting. So, what did that have to do with him? Do you feel good?" Dan Taishen looked at him and also took a jab. "What are you saying?" "I have no feelings towards this kind of bad lady." Wang Ting noticed Dan Taixuan's dangerous gaze, so he kept a stern face and replied to her in a righteous tone. "Do you think he'll believe you?" Dan Taishen snorted. She turned and went up the stairs. "Let's go. Your luck with ladies is indeed not bad." Zhu Yushao patted Wang Ting's shoulder while controlling her laughter. When Ji Xiuming went past him, he suddenly stopped and said with a calm face, "Wish you good luck. Take her down and bring glory to our nation." Luo Cheng maintained a serious expression as he spoke. Mu Zhiguo nodded. He seemed to agree with Luo Cheng. Wang Ting. To hell with bringing glory to the nation. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. You call this bringing glory to the nation? Where is your dignity? Wang Ting was speechless. He didn't think that these two quiet young men, Luo Cheng and Mu Zhiguo, would also tease him. They might seem shy, but they surely weren't. Furious, Wang Ting followed everyone up the stairs and up the mountain. "How tall is Mount Saint? Why do we still need to climb?" he asked as he walked. "No one knows how tall it is," Parik answered. "Is it because of the runes? Someone used the power of runes to expand this mountain," Wang Ting asked again. "You saw it?" Parik was shocked. "Was it that difficult?" Wang Ting glanced at him. Parik felt that Wang Ting was acting arrogant, but he didn't have the evidence to support his claim. However, he had the feeling that Wang Ting was exceptional. This fellow wasn't frightened when facing the talented martial warriors from White Eagle Nation. He could even suppress them. He also displayed his mastery of runes. This wasn't something a normal martial warrior could do. As they spoke, they came to a platform surrounded by clouds. Wang Ting stepped on the ground and glanced around him. The entire mountain ridge was snow-white, but there wasn't any snow accumulated on the ground. There were only light clouds and mist floating in the air. When these clouds dispersed, an ancient building appeared in everyone's vision. The walls were old and broken, and large stones were lying around them. Some broken statues could be seen collapsed or half-damaged. Wang Ting was stunned. This place looked extremely dilapidated. There was a huge battle here, so many things were damaged. However, many generations of leaders of Mount Saint kept these structures to serve as a warning to their descendants, Parik explained. A huge battle. Wang Ting looked at him curiously. This happened a long time ago. I'm not sure about it either. Why did he bring us here? Look over there. Parik pointed in front. Wang Ting followed his finger. Amidst the clouds, he saw the faint outline of a large colosseum with broken rocks and pillars. That will be the venue of your duels, Parik said. I didn't think that I would come back to this place. Dan Taishen glanced around her and lamented. She raised her head and looked at the sky. Memories floated into her mind. Wang Ting followed her gaze, and his pupils constricted. Further up the mountain path, he could see many ancient buildings built alongside the stairs. They winded up the mountain like a snake. These buildings were very simple. They were typical vertical column structures. Large white marble pillars with indentations stood erected, supporting the dome. It gave people a solemn and magnificent feeling. Every building was different, and each of them had its uniqueness. Some were square, some were circular. If you counted the buildings, you would discover that there were 12 of them in total. Right at the peak of the mountain behind these structures, there was a huge sculpture of a goddess. There was a battle cloak draped over the sculpture. The goddess wore a crown and held a strange half-moon-shaped weapon in her hand. In her other hand, she was clutching a shield and staring into the horizon. She looked extraordinary. Behind her, there was an exceptionally majestic and large building. It was erected on 3 layers of stone steps. The jade giant pillars, luminous colored columns, artistically chiseled roofs, and carved artwork on the walls formed this grand and spectacular building. Wang Ting was astounded. He didn't think that there would be such an amazing building on Mount Saint. These sculptures, these buildings, Mount Saint lived up to its name. The other people noticed the magical scene ahead too. Many people gasped in amazement to express their astonishment. Parik smiled proudly when he saw their reaction. Most people would give a similar expression when they saw the Holy Temple for the first time. He was used to it. That is the Holy Temple, he said to Wang Ting. The Holy Temple. Wang Ting mumbled to himself. He asked curiously, what's inside? The greatest secret of Mount Saint is kept inside. At the same time, all the leaders of Mount Saint live there. The high priest, the sage, and the goddess, Parik said with respect and admiration. Wang Ting was stunned. There was much information in his answer. The high priest was already a 12-star general stage martial warrior, so what about the sage and the goddess? Were they stronger? He wondered how many people there were inside. What about the 12 buildings? Wang Ting asked again. Those are the 12 zodiac palaces and are the 12 temple guardians. 12 powerful holy knights reside in the temples. If anyone wants to enter the holy temple, they must defeat the holy knights first, Parik explained. Holy knights? How strong are they? Wang Ting asked. They are at least low-tier general stage and above. The higher you go, the stronger they are. Parik didn't hide the details. This was widely known to everyone. However, only a few people knew the real abilities of these holy knights. Chapter 581 Mutation Form. Wang Ting activated his spiritual sight and looked at the 12 palaces. He realized that there were indeed 12 extremely strong balls of light sitting in the palaces. The weakest is at the 11-star low-tier general stage. The strongest is 13-star high-tier general stage. Wang Ting gasped and sighed in his heart. Mount Saint has a strong foundation. Bang! A dull and strong bell tone from a clock echoed in the mountain. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound but couldn't see the clock. The high priest's voice came from the front. Everyone, the time has come. We will be starting the duels. Please come forward to draw lots. The martial warriors from all the nations entered the large colosseum and scattered in the different corners. Then, the representatives of the various countries went to the high priest to draw lots to decide the sequence of the first round of duels. After some time, Dan Taishen came back. Wang Ting asked, "What's the result?" "We will be the third in line for the first round. Our opponent is country RAF. The duels were random. The most important aim was to let the nations display their power. Hence, all they had to do was fight. No one cared about fairness. The strongest would last until the end. This was the principle of the duels in this exchange event. Ji Xiaoming and the others looked in Country Raf's direction. The other party was watching them too. Their gaze collided in mid-air before they looked away silently. Who's the first to go? Dan Taixian glanced at everyone and asked. They all looked at one another. Ren Qingcang stood up suddenly and said, "I'll go." Dan Taixian turned to Wang Ting. "There's no hurry. Let's see who our opponent sends out first," Wang Ting contemplated before saying. Ren Qingcang frowned, but he didn't say anything in the end. Wang Ting was right. He wasn't being biased, so he couldn't object to his decision. However, the arrogant Ren Qingcang still felt unhappy because Wang Ting was a level higher than him. The first match started in the Colosseum. Both parties entered the arena. This was a competition between the White Eagle Nation and the Large Eagle Nation. This was interesting. The White Eagle Nation and the Large Eagle Nation were related in certain ways. The White Eagle Nation was an immigration nation. Towards the end of the 15th century, the first batch of immigrants headed to the current location of the White Eagle Nation and built a colony there. As time progressed, the immigrants were unhappy with the governance of their original country, so an independence war occurred. To the Large Eagle Nation, the White Eagle Nation wasn't a real country. It wasn't legit. No one expected the White Eagle Nation to be able to ride on the wave of the era and progress at an unexpected speed to become one of the world's most powerful nations. It caught everyone off guard. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. The Large Eagle Nation couldn't do anything to them. However, whenever both sides met, there would always be conflict. A good show was about to start. The White Eagle Nation sent an 8-star soldier-level martial warrior while the Large Eagle Nation sent a 9-star soldier-level martial warrior. None of them chose to send their Brigadier General stage martial warriors in the first round. It seemed like everyone had the same thought. They wanted to test the waters first before going all out. Anyway, there was a difference in level between the competing martial warriors. The White Eagle Nation was at a disadvantage. It looks like the White Eagle Nation will lose. Losing the first round will affect the morale of the team greatly, Chu Fei said. The people from White Eagle Nation are still as stupid and ignorant as ever. Parik scoffed. He didn't seem to have a good impression of them. I can sense your strong bitterness. Wang Teng glanced at Parik and continued, "It's too early to judge. One's level doesn't represent one's ability. Do you think he will lose?" Parik asked. Everyone looked at Wang Teng and frowned. Did he notice something? Wang Teng didn't reply to them and just stared at the arena. The duel started soon after. Both sides didn't waste any time and attacked instantly. The martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation was of the fire element while the one from the Large Eagle Nation was an earth element martial warrior. The forces on their bodies exploded. When they collided in the center, an eruption occurred. Boom! The martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation was a level lower, so he suffered a defeat after the first round of exchange. He retreated a few steps from the collision. The martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation laughed. He increased his speed and dashed towards the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation. His weapon was a Crusader sword, which was covered by thick earth force. At the same time, Earth Force sword conscious erupted. Ground-breaking slash. A loud roar escaped the mouth of the martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation. The Crusader sword gave off a frightening sword glow as it slashed towards the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation. The martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation suddenly sneered when he saw this attack. Roar! A beast-like howl came from his mouth abruptly, and flames intertwined around his body. Then, an astonishing change occurred to his body. His body suddenly expanded and grew longer. Scales started to appear on his skin, and he even grew a tail. His entire human form had changed. It was disgusting. The ferocious aura of a wild beast spread in the air. At this moment, the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation was a wild beast. Dan Taixian stood up from her seat suddenly. What is this? She wasn't the only one. The people from the other nations stood up too and stared intently at the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation. There was bewilderment in their eyes. The martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation squinted when he saw the change in his opponent. He felt a sense of danger instinctively, but his sword conscience was already released. It was too late to retract it. His gaze turned sharp as he released more force. He slashed his crusader sword down viciously. Boom! The martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation didn't dodge. The flames on his body gathered into a blade glow, which crashed into the crusader sword. Light exploded. The collision of the force swept throughout the arena. To everyone's surprise, the powerful attack didn't cause much damage to the ground of the Colosseum. Only some rock fragments and dust on the ground were blown into the air. Of course, no one dwelled on the sturdiness of the arena. All their attention was focused on the fight currently taking place. This was just an exploratory duel, but the sudden mutation of the White Eagle Nation's martial warrior had attracted everyone's gaze. The attention on this match was exceptionally high. Both parties separated amidst the fluctuation of forces. Then, they clashed once again. Two rays of lights kept colliding violently in the arena. The red and yellow rays of light set off loud explosions. Suddenly, a figure flew out. It was the martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation. The crusader sword in his hand was destroyed in the collision just now. His body had suffered a serious injury in the onslaught of fire force attacks from his opponent. He was vomiting blood continuously. Gasp! Everyone was dumbstruck. The mutation of the White Eagle Nation's martial warrior had given him so much power. He won against someone who had a higher level than him. 8-star soldier level versus 9-star soldier level. The 8-star soldier level won. Everyone's gaze was flickering. They looked at the mutated form of the martial warrior in deep thought. Wang Teng's eyes were shining as he picked up the attribute bubbles in the arena. Earth Force *80 Earth Sword Conscious *35 Fire Force *65 Origin of Life *1. Chapter 582 Gene Martial Warrior Origin of Life *1 Wang Teng was just picking up the bubbles out of habit. He wasn't expecting any good attributes from these two soldier stage martial warriors. But the truth was, no, the system gave him a tight slap in the face, yet he loved it. He wished that the system could give him more slaps like this. The origin of life was a new attribute. As for its uses, he could guess from the name, but he wasn't sure. Wang Teng's gaze shimmered. As the origin of life merged into his body, he felt as if his entire body was floating. There was a comfortable sensation coming from the depth of his spirit. He almost couldn't control himself and moaned in delight. Fortunately, he reined himself in with his strong willpower. If not, this would become a dark history he could never erase. Wang Teng felt a little fearful and wiped his cold sweat secretly. Damn it, this attribute is irritating. What's wrong with you? Zhu Yushao noticed his weird expression and asked involuntarily. I'm fine. I just think that the strange appearance of the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation is quite funny. Wang Teng came up with a random excuse. Neither human nor beast. Dan Taixian snorted. Wang Teng could sense that Dan Taixian didn't like the mutation. He heaved a sigh of relief when he noticed that no one was suspecting him. At this moment, Wang Teng finally understood what the origin of life was. Similar to his guess, it was an attribute that could replenish one's life. This was heaven-defying. To think that such a powerful attribute was dropped. If he continued collecting origin of life attributes, he could extend his life. Did this mean that he didn't have to be scared of dying? Phut, he wasn't scared of death. He just wanted a stable life. Honestly, it was unbelievable that this incredible attribute was dropped during the battle between the martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation and the Large Eagle Nation. But what was the reason? Could it be? Wang Teng looked at the White Eagle Nation martial warrior below in contemplation. Because of the sudden mutation, the martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation was at a disadvantage. Everyone thought that the battle had ended, but the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation suddenly dashed forward and raised his arm, smashing it down on the head of the martial warrior from the Large Eagle Nation. I admit the martial warrior from the large eagle nation was flabbergasted. He wanted to admit defeat, but it was too late. Boom. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. The martial warrior from the large eagle nation was violently punched into the ground. Fresh blood spurted everywhere, and he died instantly. The entire arena was silent. Everyone was shocked by the ruthlessness of the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation. Who would have thought that he would suddenly launch a killing move? This was just a competition. Wasn't the martial warrior from White Eagle Nation afraid of intensifying the conflict between the two nations? In the past, everyone still maintained harmony on the surface. This would never happen unless the situation was uncontrollable. Was the White Eagle Nation crazy? Atrocious. The martial warrior leading the large eagle nation was infuriated. He dashed into the arena and grabbed the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation. Bang! At this moment, the leader of the White Eagle Nation, Yoke, appeared in front of him, and they exchanged a blow. Tap, tap, tap. The two of them retreated multiple steps and glared at each other. The martial warrior from the large eagle nation looked at his companion who was lying motionless on the ground. His face was grim as he said angrily, "Yoke, this is too much." HMPH. A hint of frustration flashed past Yoke's eyes. It was barely noticeable, though. He snorted and said, "Arnold, you're not a newbie anymore. Don't you know that there's always risk in a duel? You can't blame anyone." He had already admitted defeat. Arnold glared at Yoke and said. He hadn't. Why didn't he say it earlier? Yoke wasn't afraid of making the situation worse. He refused to admit that they were wrong. Arnold trembled in anger. He turned and shouted, "High Priest, what do you say?" The High Priest hesitated for a moment before saying, the martial warrior from the large eagle nation hadn't admitted defeat, but the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation still killed him even though he was about to do so. He violated the rules of this exchange event. He will be banned from participating in future matches. I accept this sentence, Yoke said immediately. Arnold had to swallow his frustrations. The High Priest wasn't helping either side, but rules were rules. He had nothing to say. Leave. Yoke glared at the mutated martial warrior and walked towards the spectators' stand. The martial warrior had regained his human form. His face was pale, and the wild beast aura around him had disappeared. He followed Yoke obediently. Arnold was furious. He glared at the two martial warriors before taking the corpse of his companion and returning to the spectators' stand. The second match was between Country Neon and Country Bat. The duels resumed. In the spectators' stand, Wang Teng glanced in the direction of the White Eagle Nation and said, "Is there something wrong with the mutated martial warrior? He probably killed his opponent because he couldn't control his rage." Ji Xiaoming, Mu Zhiguo, and many others were shocked by his statement. They hadn't noticed anything earlier. After all, when the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation mutated, he looked clear-minded. He didn't seem to have lost his cool. Yes. Dan Taixian nodded and explained, the White Eagle Nation has always been studying gene martial warriors. Gene martial warrior. Ji Xiaoming and the others were astounded. This was unexpected. To think that the White Eagle Nation had succeeded in their research. It looks like their study of gene martial warriors is very in-depth, but there are still some flaws, Wang Teng said thoughtfully. That situation occurs when the martial warrior's consciousness is overtaken by the wild beast's consciousness, Dan Taixian said. Be careful if you meet an opponent from the White Eagle Nation. Yes. Everyone was surprised. They nodded fervently. They had witnessed the battle clearly just now. After the martial warrior from the White Eagle Nation mutated, his ability surpassed his stage. This was enough for them to stay vigilant. But after this first case, the High Priest will raise his vigilance and not allow accidents to happen to the other martial warriors. If not, the exchange event will lose its purpose, Dan Taixian continued. She glanced at the White Eagle Nation and sneered. Also, I don't think White Eagle Nation dares to be too atrocious. It won't be able to bear the anger of all the nations. Do gene martial warriors possess a lethal flaw? Wang Ting touched his chin and asked. Oh, why do you say so? Dan Taixian asked without giving a reply. It's just a guess. Look at the mutated martial warrior. He seemed exhausted as though he had fought 300 rounds with a female demon, Wang Ting said. Everyone was speechless. What do you mean by fighting 300 rounds with a female demon? What kind of analogy is this? What was going through his mind? Why couldn't he think of something less strange? Human language, please. Dan Taixian rolled her eyes at him. Cough, I mean there's a problem with them. Wang Ting coughed awkwardly and replied. Everyone regained their composure and observed the warrior. They realized that Wang Ting was right. The mutated martial warrior seemed exceptionally exhausted. He was a little weak. Gene defect. Dan Taixian suddenly smiled as she glanced at everyone. They all looked towards Dan Taixian involuntarily. Astonishment appeared in Wang Ting's eyes. This seemed to be the reason draining the other party's life. Will the gene defect affect his lifespan? Wang Ting asked. I think so. I only know that the first batch of gene martial warriors didn't live long, Dan Taixian replied. Wang Ting nodded and stopped asking further questions. This was enough. Without a doubt, the origin of life was an attribute dropped by the gene martial warrior. Wang Ting's eyes shimmered. Were all of the White Eagle Nation's martial warriors gene martial warriors? If that was true, it would be a blast for him. The martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation suddenly shuddered. They felt an evil aura surging towards them. Yoke glanced around him curiously. At his moment, the battle between Country Bat and Country Neon had reached an intense stage. The winner would emerge very soon. It was Country Neon. This result was surprising. Country Neon wasn't big and had limited resources. Hence, they didn't have many talented martial warriors. It was unexpected that they won their first match. The martial warriors from Country Neon cheered happily as if they had achieved a great feat. Many people shook their heads. Some martial warriors from other countries even looked at them with contempt. They looked down on the martial warriors from Country Neon. Wang Ting picked up the attribute bubbles in the arena. Wood Force *135 Metal Force *110 Wood Force *85 Next was the third match. Country Shia vs Country RAF. A tall and lofty man from Country RAF walked out and entered the arena. Ren Qingtsang stood up too. Wang Ting glanced at the man. He had reached the 9-star soldier level, so Ren Qingtsang should be able to handle it. He didn't stop him. Ren Qingtsang walked into the arena and stood opposite his opponent. The match started instantly. Boom! Their forces exploded and collided with each other. Although the martial warrior from Country RAF seemed tall and muscular, his speed was astonishing. It was unexpected. However, Ren Qingtsang wasn't an easy opponent to deal with. As a lightning element martial warrior, his first move attracted everyone's attention. Lightning force. Everyone was shocked. Country Shia breeds talents. This saying is correct, Yoke said in an eerie tone, his gaze turning sharp. So, Hes just at the 9-star soldier level, Fortes said. What do you know? He might not be able to make it this year, but what about the next? His stage is in the future, Yoke replied. A cold glint flashed past Fortes' eyes. Shall we get rid of him? Let's wait and see. This isn't a convenient place to act. Yoke hesitated. The match grew more and more intense. Within a minute, the battle came to an end. Ren Qingkang's ability was solid. He had mastered his Lei Tang physique, so his body was extremely strong. Lightning flashed around him and struck Country RAF's martial warrior furiously. The martial warrior from Country RAF flew back. When he was in mid-air, Ren Qingtsang appeared above him and kicked him viciously. Splurt! The martial warrior from Country RAF slammed on the ground with a loud bang. He curled into a ball and spurted blood out from his mouth, losing his consciousness immediately. Country Shia won this match. The martial warriors from the other nations were dumbfounded. They looked at Ren Qingtsang with different emotions. No one knew what they were thinking. Ren Qingtsang returned to the spectators' stand and glanced at Wang Ting. Then, he sat down on his seat without saying a word. Wang Teng understood that gaze. This fellow was showing off his strength. He didn't care, though. Although Ren Qingtsang was targeting him, he didn't take it to heart. Ren Qingtsang had lost to him. No matter how much he tried, he wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. Wang Teng was already ahead of him. There was no reason for him to look back. If Ren Qingtsang decided to pull some tricks, Wang Teng didn't mind crushing him to death. But this fellow was a lightning attribute power bank. He had dropped many lightning attributes, and this was a good thing for Wang Teng. Lightning Force *60 Lightning Force *35 Latang Physique *12. The match continued. Martial warriors from all countries stepped out, and the battles were heated. After a round of probing, all the martial warriors below Brigadier General stage had fought a round. There were both losers and wins. Country Shia's path was exceptionally smooth. All the students won their opponent. No one lost. The martial warriors from other countries had grim expressions. The young generation of martial warriors from Country Shia was exceptional. All of them were the cream of the crop. Many people also noticed that Wang Ting hadn't made his move. Wang Ting looked the same age as Ji Xiuming and the other students. However, he was sitting calmly in the spectators' stand and watching the matches. Could this young man be above the Brigadier General stage? The White Eagle Nation was paying attention to Country Shia all this while. They placed high importance on the martial warriors who hadn't acted. After all, the students in front had already executed great strength. How weak could the other people be? Fortes, Kuhn, and the martial warriors who interacted with Wang Ting had a deep impression of him, especially his domineering aura when he talked back to Fortes. They didn't dare to underestimate him. I think you're thinking too highly of him. No matter how strong they are, they won't be stronger than us, Fortes said angrily. They can be arrogant because they haven't met us. Well, show them our moves at that time. Kuhn smiled hideously. Be humble. Those martial warriors aren't easy to deal with. Marsha chuckled. Marsha, do you like that little guy? Why are you speaking up for him? Kuhn looked at Marsha and scoffed. Kuhn. Fortes' face darkened. Everyone, keep quiet. Yoke glared at them. Don't underestimate the martial warriors from Country Shia when you meet them. Don't use your gene mutation unless necessary either. Brother Yoke, we spent so much effort to obtain our gene ability. Why can't we use them? Kuhn was unwilling to listen. The gene ability isn't perfect yet. You saw what happened before. During a real battle, you might not be able to control the wild beast's consciousness, Yoke reminded them gravely. Tempage, Hes too weak. His willpower isn't strong enough. We're different. Our willpower has passed many tests. We're much stronger than him, Fortes said. That's right, we're different. We can control our gene ability. Don't worry about us, Kuhn said. You. Forget it, you can do what you want. Don't blame me for not warning you if something goes south. Yoke snorted and left. The matches for today had ended. They would return to the little town to rest, and the event would continue tomorrow. Fortes and Kuhn didn't take Yoke's words seriously. On the other hand, Marsha stared thoughtfully at Yoke's back view. There was a strange glint in her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Chapter 583. I'm going to act for God and kill him. 7 p.m. in the hotel. Everyone dispersed after having their dinner. Wang Ting stood up, stretched his back, and sighed in satisfaction. He had to admit that the cuisine made by the Force Chef here was unique and tasty in its own way. Since they were able to become Force Chefs, they had their talents. However, the weakest member in Wang Teng's team was at the 9-star soldier level. Hence, the effects of ordinary Force dishes were very limited. They would have been greater if a Force Chef master personally created dishes for them using high-class ingredients. Mount Saint wouldn't arrange a Force Chef master to serve them specifically, though. Although Wang Teng was a Force Chef master, this was his first time having Mount Saint cuisine, so he wasn't picky. He stood up and walked out of the hotel. Wang Teng, where are you going? Dan Taishen frowned and asked. Strolling around. Wang Ting waved his hand without turning his back and walked out of the hotel. This fellow. Dan Taishen was extremely frustrated. During the exchange, no one had any thoughts of playing. Only this heartless fellow didn't take the global exchange event to heart. He continued playing and eating as he should. Others might think that he was using the country's money to go on a holiday. Ren Qingtsang, Ji Xiuming, and the others felt a little envious when they saw Wang Teng leaving. After a round of battle today, they didn't have any energy left to play. On the other hand, Wang Teng sat on the spectators' stand the entire day and didn't move a single finger. Everyone felt a little exasperated when they thought about this. They started to feel unhappy. Ignore him. Have a good rest and prepare for tomorrow's event. Dan Taishen felt helpless. She consoled the other students and chased them back to rest. Force Chef *20 Force Chef *15 Force Chef *38 Wang Teng walked along the street and used his spiritual kinesis to pick up the Force Chef attributes scattered around him. As the attribute bubbles merged into his body, the methods of cooking Mount Saint dishes floated into his mind. Force Chef, 1368 3000, Master, Wang Ting nodded in satisfaction. As an outstanding and all-round youth, he mustn't give up his cooking skills. As the saying went, to secure the heart of a woman, one must secure her appetite first. Wang Ting felt that with his cooking skill, he could probably get the hearts and appetites of many ladies. He touched his chin and suddenly thought of something. Wouldn't it be impressive if he was able to grasp the recipes of all the different cuisines in the world? At that time, which lady would be able to resist his delicious food? Oh my God, oh my God. All right, it's decided. I will be an all-round Epicurean. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Wang Ting had never been so resolute. After leaving the food street, Wang Teng hid his figure and merged into the darkness like a dark spirit. He sneaked into the museum. Hello, I'm back again. Wang Teng repeated the same steps and took the crystal skull out from the display while hiding it from everyone. He carried it as he collected attributes from it. This image was unbearable. Imperial Realm Enlightenment *2 Imperial Realm Spirit *1 Imperial Realm Spirit *3 Imperial Realm Enlightenment *1 As he collected attributes, he seeped his spiritual power into the crystal skull and used it to nourish his spiritual power. Two effects simultaneously. The results were amazing. This feels good. Other people could use the crystal skull to nourish their spiritual power, but no one had discovered this method. They didn't have the luck. Wang Teng was delighted. He collected attributes the entire night and only left the museum unwillingly when he felt that it was almost time. Enlightenment, 166 3000, Imperial Realm, Spirit, 194 3000, Imperial Realm. His enlightenment rose by 31 points and his spirit by 36 points. The most important thing was, both attributes were at the Imperial Realm. During normal times, it was extremely difficult for him to raise his Imperial Realm spirit and enlightenment. The crystal skull was like a portable battery for him. Wang Ting's desire to get the crystal skull got stronger. He must get it. They were wasting it by putting it on display. Why not just give it to him? The next day, everyone gathered in the ancient Colosseum again. It was early in the morning, so there was a faint morning mist hovering in the mountains. It covered the sky, and the sculptures and buildings on the peak appeared more holy in the ambience. Wang Ting stood at the edge of the Colosseum and looked towards the peak. After a while, he retracted his gaze and sat down. The atmosphere between the various nations had gotten tenser. Competitiveness floated lightly in the air above the Colosseum. A figure floated down from the peak. It was the high priest who was dressed in a white gown. He glanced around him and said calmly, "Everyone, we will not be drawing lots today. You are free to challenge any opponent never been used before." Everyone was shocked when the high priest suddenly changed the rules. "High priest, why did you suddenly change the method?" Yoke from White Eagle Nation frowned and asked. "This is a decision jointly made by the leaders of the Holy Temple. I didn't make the decision. If you have any questions, you can challenge the 12 Zodiac Palaces and lodge your appeal. Or you can leave this exchange event," the high priest said indifferently. This was a decision made by the Holy Temple. Although everyone was astounded, they didn't say anything. There might be some changes to the duels because of the freedom of choice. For instance, the rules of the past wouldn't work now. However, the decision was finalized, so no one had anything to say. If there are no questions, the duels will start now. The high priest floated to the edge of the Colosseum after he finished speaking and waited for the martial warriors from the various nations to enter the arena. All the nations turned quiet as they stared at one another. No one wanted to be the first one. Wang Ting was bored. He took out a table from his space ring and placed some fruits and snacks on it. Then, he sat there and ate his food happily. He was so bored when watching the matches yesterday, so he had a sudden idea while touring the streets last night. He bought some food, and look, they were put to use today. He admired his cleverness. Wang Ting silently gave himself many thumbs up. Dan Taishen and the others were stunned by his actions, staring at him in a daze. They didn't know what to say. The martial warriors from the other countries felt their jaws almost dropping to the ground. They stared at Wang Ting with a weird expression. Was there something wrong with his brain? Didn't he know what occasion this was? A tinge of bewilderment appeared on the high priest's calm face. He felt that his frame of mind, which he had cultivated for many years, was being stepped on by this young man from country Shia. He must be a devil. F***K, let me act for God and kill him. The high priest took a deep breath before he managed to calm his emotions. He chased away the rashness in his heart and resumed the nobility and indifference of a high priest. At this moment, someone from the White Eagle Nation walked out and came to the center of the Colosseum. He pointed at Wang Ting and shouted angrily, "I, Fortes, want to challenge you. Do you dare to accept the challenge?" However, the real formidable warriors from the White Eagle Nation haven't appeared yet, Arnold said. Gerald turned serious and nodded. A lofty martial warrior that looked like a bear from Country Boar looked at Wang Ting and Fortes in the arena. He laughed and said, "Are they playing a game? Don't mind them, Valeria. Your opponents are not them." A martial warrior of similar size looked at the lady beside him in admiration. That was right, this bulky martial warrior was a lady. Her limbs were thick, and she was taller than 2 meters. Despite the bulging muscles on her body, she had an exquisite face like a Barbie doll. A King Kong Barbie. In Country Neon's direction, a 1.5 meters tall lady was quietly watching the battle below with no expression on her face. "Tongji, can you gauge his strength?" the man beside her asked. "I can't. The man from Country Shia is very mysterious." A strange light glimmered in Tongji's eyes. There were no fluctuations in her voice, though. "Even you can't tell anything," the man muttered. In the arena, Fortes was raging because he couldn't hit Wang Ting no matter how hard he tried. His eyes turned red, and he panted heavily. He screamed, "Are you a monkey? Do you only know how to dodge? Come and fight with me head on." Wang Ting suddenly stopped in his tracks and glared at Fortes. "Take back your words." Fortes ignored him. Instead, a tinge of delight flashed past his eyes. Contempt appeared in his gaze as he dashed towards Wang Ting. Die. The 2 swords slashed through the air. Fortes didn't hold back at all. Golden Sword Conscious exploded and submerged Wang Ting. Wang Ting stood in the same spot with a cold expression. Suddenly, he raised his arm and grabbed the Golden Sword Conscious. Everyone was flabbergasted. Was he looking for death? He grabbed the sword conscious with his bare hands. Was there something wrong with his brain? Hes overestimating himself. Dan Taishen stood up immediately. Her expression changed slightly. Fortes smiled hideously. He was mocking Wang Ting for overestimating himself. Even a low-tier general stage martial warrior didn't dare to welcome his golden sword conscious with his hands. Wang Ting was looking for death. Bang! The next instant, Fortes widened his eyes in surprise. Wang Ting had grabbed the golden sword glow successfully. Then, he crumbled it with his hands. He crumbled it. Under everyone's gaze, the golden sword conscious shattered inch by inch. It was destroyed. This scene was too stimulating. It was hard to believe that someone could destroy Sword Conscious with their physical body. Did Wang Teng train his physique especially? The martial warriors who didn't place much attention on him stood up one after another and stared at Wang Ting with their eyes wide open. Dan Taixian let out a long sigh. Her eyes were glistening. She had underestimated Wang Teng, even his physical body was so powerful. In the arena, Wang Teng destroyed the Golden Sword Conscious and raised his head. With a gentle smile, he looked at Fortes. Young man, your Sword Conscious isn't hard enough. Damn it. Fortes retreated instantly. This scene had stimulated him greatly, and he felt a strong sense of danger from Wang Teng. Too naive. Wang Ting shook his head and disappeared. Fortes was dumbfounded. He searched for Wang Ting's figure around him. Behind you. Right then, a calm voice sounded beside his ear. It was inches away from him. Oh shit. Fortes wanted to turn his head, but it was too late. Bang. A dull sound was heard beside him. Fortes felt a huge knock on his head and excruciating pain. His vision went black. Everyone looked into the arena. A golden brick had suddenly appeared in Wang Ting's hand, leaving them stunned. Dan Taixian covered her face. Chapter 585. Hurry up and mutate. Hurry. Embarrassing. He had embarrassed himself in front of the world. This was an international exchange event, and all the talents from the various nations were gathered here. It wasn't just a simple competition. They were fighting for their dignity. Why couldn't Wang Teng be more serious? He could have acted cool or put on a show. Anything was better than this. Is he trying to promote our nation's culture by using a brick as his weapon? What's more, it's a golden brick. Doesn't he find it tacky? Dan Taixian covered her face. She didn't want to look at Wang Teng. She wanted to cut ties with him. Everyone's gaze was so strange. They were looking at Wang Teng as if he was a weirdo. Actually, most of the martial warriors were in a daze. They looked back and forth between Wang Teng and Fortes, especially at the large bump behind the latter's head. They shuddered. Goosebumps appeared all over their bodies. Even the high priest was speechless. His calmness was at the edge of breaking down once again. There seemed to be thunder roaring in his mind. He was dumbstruck because of Wang Ting. Zhu Yushao took a deep breath and asked, "That's Wang Teng's weapon?" Chu Fei, Yang Bo, and the others turned to Dan Taixian. They weren't familiar with Wang Ting, so they didn't know that he had this move. They were filled with curiosity. As a renowned talent, was it appropriate to use a brick as his weapon? Didn't he find it humiliating? Even the quiet and dull Mu Jigua stared at Dan Taixian, hoping to get some information from her mouth. Ji Xiaoming, Luo Cheng, and the other students had witnessed Wang Ting's antics during the national #1 martial arts competition, so they were extremely familiar with the brick. When they saw the expressions of disbelief on other people's faces, they gave them a "you're like frogs" in a well look. They found it normal. Seriously? Everyone regained their senses and was dumbfounded. They felt that they were being led in the wrong direction, so they hurriedly shook their heads to get rid of this frightening thought. But why did it feel refreshing to see Fortes lying on the ground in a miserable state? The people from the White Eagle Nation were eerily silent. The talent from their nation was thrown onto the ground with a brick. This might be the best joke for the year for the White Eagle Nation. Yoke was shaking, with his vision going black. He had a bad feeling. If you have problems with this website, please continue reading your novel on our new website myboxnovel.com. Thanks. Although there wasn't any live broadcast for this exchange event, no one could hide the things that happened here. A big piece of news like this wouldn't be forgotten. When the exchange ended, when the day ended, this piece of news would spread to the entire world. The headlines of all media outlets might be this: "Oh my God. A contestant of the White Eagle Nation got smashed to the ground by a brick from Country Shia's fighter. Is the White Eagle Nation too weak, or is Country Shia too pervert?" Yoke didn't dare to continue thinking. He grabbed the table beside him and yelled, "Fortes, get up. Use your gene ability. F***K, you idiot." He couldn't care about his image at this juncture. He even started cursing. He had forgotten how he had warned the martial warriors against using their gene ability. To hell with using it carefully. They had been embarrassed in front of the world. What was the point of using it cautiously? The martial warriors from the other nations felt sorry for Yoke when they saw him jumping in anger. It was tragic. Yoke's shout might have had some effect. Fortes, who was on the ground, suddenly twitched. A fierce aura gradually floated out from his body. Wang Teng wasn't shocked. Instead, he felt elated, and his eyes lit up like bulbs. Good riddance, he was mutating. What did this mean? It meant that there would be origin of life attributes. Wang Ting looked at Fortes excitedly. Hurry up and mutate, hurry. Zhu Yushao and the others didn't know what he was thinking. When they saw Fortes climbing up and using his gene ability, their expressions changed. Make your move. What's that fellow waiting for? Zhu Yushao turned grave, feeling agitated. Dan Taishen frowned. Looking at the situation in the arena, she was worried. They weren't the only ones. The martial warriors from the other countries didn't understand why Wang Teng didn't attack when he had the chance. This young man is too confident. Waiting for the other party to finish his mutation, Gerald from the Large Eagle Nation commented. Overconfidence is arrogance. I want to see how he will deal with it. Arnold smiled. The middle-aged man, Shan Ben Quan, from Country Neon said, Wang Teng is strange. Yes, he's strange. Tongji, who was beside him, didn't say anything. She looked at the arena below expressionlessly, but one could see the excitement in her gaze. Wang Ting picked up the dropped attributes while watching Fortes mutating. Spiritual Realm Spirit *35 Spiritual Realm Spirit *38 Metal Force *120 That beating was worth it. Look, he had dropped many Spiritual Realm Enlightenment and Spirit attributes. Although this was just an appetizer for him, it was still food. He wasn't picky. Suddenly, Wang Ting's eyes lit up. It dropped. It dropped. It dropped. Origin of Life *2 Origin of Life *1 As expected, Origin of Life attributes had dropped again. There were 3 points in total, 2 more than the previous martial warrior. Wang Ting almost screamed in joy. This felt amazing. He pulled an emergency brake on his emotions before looking at his attributes panel. Origin of Life, 1354 After picking up the Origin of Life, a new row had appeared on his attributes panel. Originally, he had 1350 points of Origin of Life. With the additional 3 points and the 1 point from before, it became 1354. Wang Ting didn't know what this number meant. But as the Origin of Life increased, the comfortable feeling got stronger. This was a direct benefit that others would die to have. Wang Teng was satisfied. Roar. Suddenly, a furious roar came from ahead of him. Fortes' mutation was finished within a few breaths. He raised his head abruptly and glared at Wang Ting with his vertical pupils like that of a wild beast. His appearance had changed entirely. Black scales grew on his body, and his hands transformed into sharp claws. They were giving off a metallic glow. His gaze was ruthless, but when he met Wang Ting's eyes, he was stunned. Why did that guy look like he was chuckling? Why are you laughing? Fortes said angrily. His gaze was dangerous. Am I? Wang Ting kept a straight face and denied it. You must be wrong. I'm not laughing. You're not funny at all. Fortes. Anyway, you look so ugly now. Wang Ting sized up Fortes and commented. The veins on Fortes' head started jumping. Damn it, this fellow had just sprinkled salt on his wound. His mutated form was too ugly. It was destroying his handsome image. Chapter 586 Sorry, I didn't stop in time. Fortes felt that he was very handsome. The only regret he had for his mutated form was that it was too ugly. At first, he had automatically forgotten about it. He decided that he would immediately resume his normal form after this match. He never expected to get exposed by this fellow in front of him. Why did he have to talk about it? Why was this brat so irritating? Humans took many years to evolve from wild beasts to a civilized species. Why are y'all going backward? Is it fun to be wild beasts? Wang Teng shook his head and continued as if he hadn't noticed Fortes' expression. Fortes' face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He was furious. Wang Teng was too irritating. They took pride in their gene ability, but Wang Teng treated them as wild beasts. This was unbearable. Why do you have to be animals when you can be a human? Do you like that style more? Wang Ting touched his chin and wondered aloud. Fortes, the people from the White Eagle Nation, the martial warriors from around the world, Dan Taishen and the others, like this style? What did he think the people from the White Eagle Nation were? Perverts. Wang Teng's voice wasn't loud, but everyone could hear it clearly since they were all martial warriors. They were speechless. This fellow was evil. He could anger someone to death with his words alone. Everyone looked at the martial warriors from the White Eagle Nation. They felt delighted at their plight. I heard that the White Eagle Nation, Wang Teng still wanted to say something, but Fortes didn't want to hear his nonsense anymore. Shut up. Fortes exploded in anger. With a bellow, his body disappeared on the spot. He turned into lingering shadows as he charged towards Wang Teng. Die. At this moment, Fortes' speed and strength both rose by a huge margin. He was much stronger than before. The force in his body erupted. The swords in his hands gave out a sharp sword aura as he slashed them out. Metal sword conscious, 5th level. Fortes' metal sword aura seemed to have received a boost, reaching the 5th level. It was extremely sharp, so much so that it seemed to be able to cut the air. Sword marks started to appear on the sturdy grounds of the Colosseum. Dust flew in the air. Wang Ting stood under the powerful sword conscious like a weak and helpless little grass. Can he block it? The same question appeared in the hearts of all the martial warriors who were watching this scene. They placed high importance on the gene ability of the White Eagle Nation's martial warriors. They wanted to see the difference between ordinary martial warriors and the White Eagle Nation's martial warriors under the influence of their gene ability. But unexpectedly, Wang Teng didn't do anything. He allowed the sword glow to crash down. Boom! The sword glow engulfed Wang Ting's entire body while force explosions occurred in the area. The residual force was frightening as it spread out. Hez, defeated. Luo Cheng and the others stared below in disbelief. How could that person, who was so much stronger than them, get defeated so easily? In the sky, Dan Taishen looked up. She wasn't the only one. Many other martial warriors noticed something amiss and looked up. Astonishment appeared in the high priest's eyes. He looked at the sky and said, "This young man is interesting." A black figure soared down from the sky amid a golden light, creating a beautiful arc. Fortes was astounded. He leaned back and wanted to evade the attack. Seeing through the opponent's dodge, a cold smile appeared at the edge of Wang Ting's lips. He lowered his body and sent the brick to Fortes' head. Boom! The brick smashed onto Fortes directly, throwing him more than 10 meters back. He was slammed on the ground. Fortes' head had gotten harder after his mutation. He shook his head and leaped up, roaring in anger as he dashed towards Wang Teng again. Your head is hard. Wang Teng was a little surprised before he vanished once again. Fortes' heart skipped a beat when he saw Wang Teng disappearing. He had suffered terribly because of this strange footwork just now and got a beating in his head. He could still feel the lingering fear. This fellow was sly. He loved a sneak attack. This time, he had learned his lesson. Since he couldn't find Wang Teng, he waved his swords and blocked his body in all directions. Here. Wang Teng's figure suddenly appeared on Fortes' left. He chuckled. Boom! Fortes was prepared as he slashed his long sword to the left. Unfortunately, Wang Teng had disappeared again, leaving only his lingering shadow behind. Where are you hitting? Have you gone blind? Here. Wang Teng's voice was heard from behind him. Fortes jumped up in fright. He swung his long sword back without any time to think. Visit Riadel. Me for extra chapters. But he missed again. Wang Teng continued to appear and disappear around Fortes, forming lingering shadows and keeping Fortes' eyes fully occupied. Fortes was getting dizzy. He didn't know where the real Wang Teng was. Fortes is going to lose. Tongji shook her head. Gerald from the Large Eagle Nation and Valeria from Country Boar shook their heads too. They knew that Fortes was losing. This idiot. Yoke's expression was ugly. He cursed in his heart. Kuhn and the others wore grim expressions on their faces. They felt furious. This young man was playing with them. The martial warrior from Country Shia was evil. In the arena, Wang Teng noticed that Fortes had completely lost control. His eyeballs were blood red, and he was screaming and tossing around crazily. Wang Teng knew that he had taken all the attributes he could, so he stepped out abruptly and entered the territory of his dancing sword glows. He slammed his brick out. Bang! 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 Wang Teng didn't hold back at all, smashing the brick again and again on Fortes' face. Fortes was stunned by the beating. He spun on the spot with stars in his eyes. A brigadier general stage martial warrior was slapped in the face by a brick until he couldn't make sense of his surroundings. One could tell how ruthless Wang Teng was. After a few seconds, Fortes' face was swollen like a pig's head. There were many bumps on his head. He looked tragic. Anyone who saw him would praise his dignified look now. Enough! A shout suddenly came from the White Eagle Nation's direction. Wang Teng's hand paused in the air, the metal brick stopping less than 10 centimeters away from Fortes' face. He turned and looked at Yoke. "We admit defeat," Yoke said coldly. Boom. The moment he finished, Wang Teng's brick suddenly dropped. Fortes was thrown off his feet. He slammed onto the ground heavily and fainted. "You." Yoke was infuriated. "I'm sorry, I couldn't stop in time. I didn't do it on purpose." Wang Teng looked at him innocently. "Bitch." Yoke was so angry he wanted to vomit blood. This bastard was a devil. He was inhumane. Gasp. The battle ended, and everyone gasped in shock upon seeing Fortes' appearance. This young man was heartless. Fortes was beaten so badly that one couldn't see his face anymore. His head was swollen to twice its original size. It was miserable. Even a brigadier general stage martial warrior would have a concussion after this beating. They looked at Wang Teng in the arena. He blew his brick as if he was blowing away the dust on it. He seemed to treasure his brick dearly. Weirdo. This fellow was definitely a weirdo. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.